I call to order meeting of the Finance Committee, March 1st, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the meeting. First of all, I would like to thank the school department for reaching out and helping out the Finance Committee with the location to have our meetings and public hearings for the annual town meeting. I'd like to extend that thank you. Thank you for this help with this. As many people watching and here know, that Town Hall had a problem there. There was a flood, a lot of damage, and it's tremendously bad that happened, but we had to get our stuff done, and the school department reached out to help, so thank you. Okay. Sure.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, public hearing is opened.
I'll make a motion to open the meeting.
All in favor? Aye. Great, we're all set. Thank you.
All right, thank you. First on the agenda, we have Stoughton Public Schools for the town budget, education budgets. Dr. Rabb, would you like to present?
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy, and members of the committee. I'm very pleased to present our FY24 budget for next year. If you take a look at the overview, I'm going to be working off of that. So if you look at the overview sheet, that'll be the easiest way to follow along with my remarks right now. So as we stated in our budget summary, the 1.1% increase, the $1.05 million, represents the remainder of our Chapter 70 Thank You State funding that was awarded in FY23 and used to fund two articles at the special town meeting in November. And so we have stayed true to our word in terms of what we were going to do for FY24. And those funds from the two articles, the $1,052,409, has been rolled into this FY24 budget. So in many ways, that makes this a flat budget. The school district's 24 budget doesn't utilize any additional taxpayer funds, and it is all from the Chapter 70 increase that we received this year, and this certainly has rolled forward into next year. As I begin this presentation, I'd like to draw your attention to the staff increases and decreases at the bottom of the page, and if you'll allow me to start there, and we can talk about some of them, and then I'll go back and I'll run through the top of the page. Recently, we reorganized our administrative staff, and we wanted to make the scope of work clearer for our administrators and streamline all of our job descriptions. So it was a wonderful opportunity to sit down and go through all the positions, revise and update our job descriptions, and it was a great opportunity to speak with the staff, make everybody understand the scope of their work and what everybody was doing. And it really helped us understand who was reporting to whom and make that very clear. So the first new position is part of our triennial plan. We're right now in year 1 of a 3-year triennial plan, and this position is part of our year 2. We have seen an increase in our EL population, our English language learners. Currently, we have over 400 English language learners in the district, some who are speaking no English at all at level 1, and others who over 5 or 6 years have become fluent, and they're now in the system, and we need to track them. And there's a lot of rigorous tracking that the state requires. So in a situation now where we're over 400 English language learners, we have added an ELE program coordinator to work with our ELE program supervisor. And so those two positions will be working together to oversee over 14 teachers in that department. So that department has grown over the last couple of years, and currently there's over 14 teachers. We need this additional position because there's increased individualized learning plans for our EL students. And because so many students are coming in, we need to make sure we're tracking them, and we need to make sure that they're being successful and following all the rules that the Department of Education requires of us for those students. So this position is critical. We have been planning for it. We embedded it into the triennial plan in year 2, which is next year. So we're looking forward to that. In terms of the next two positions, there's 2 assistant superintendent positions there. we recently decided not to fill one of those assistant superintendent positions. So last night at our school committee meeting, we did fill the assistant superintendent of human resources, health and operations, Mr. Colantonio, the principal of the middle school. I'm sure everybody saw the announcement. We're real excited to have him joining us here at Central Administrative Staff. So we filled that position, and that position is a school committee appointment. So assistant superintendent positions are school committee appointments, and he was appointed last night at the school committee meeting. The other assistant superintendent position we were planning on, we chose not to fill, and it's an opportunity in two areas. It's an opportunity for the school committee. I think everybody here knows the school committee will be looking for another superintendent, and so that'll give them some funding available to search for another superintendent and look for another superintendent. And later on, when we talk a little bit about special education, you'll see that we embedded in the FY24 budget an additional $300,000 in special education transportation, because we've been following our special education transportation closely all year, and we've had additional students come on board, and we've had to use outside vendors in order to make sure that those students are being transported to the places that they need to go. So that funding will need to be available as well, as we know we're seeing increases in special education transportation beyond what we predicted even back in October when we put this budget together. So we filled one of the assistant superintendents, and the other one we're going to leave unfilled. The human resources specialist position is a critical position that'll be working with the new assistant superintendent for human resources, health, and operations, and they'll be the ones really doing a lot of the work with. Sure. Of course, sure.
No, there's no speakers in here, so he can just speak louder.
I'll do that.
That's okay,
Perfect.
sorry, yeah. Let's speak louder.
Dolores, thank you.
Turn that,
Thank you.
you can turn the dial down on the air purifier.
Oh, yeah, you can turn the air.
I'll take care of it.
I need it louder too. The town hall or our adaptive devices, is there any
Turn it down.
I don't think so, no.
those of us who are hearing impaired?
I can absolutely project my voice. I just, don't accuse me of shouting, that's all. So,
You can
I'm
shout.
perfectly
Shout,
capable.
please.
I'm used to shouting in the finance committee.
So the human resources specialist position will be working closely with our assistant superintendent, and the position will allow for an easily identifiable person for all employees to get timely information regarding benefits, to track benefits. We have close to 600 employees in the district, and all of them, to some degree or another, intersect with human resources during their time that they're here. And so those two positions will be working closely together. What's great is that Mrs. Husseini has been working upstairs to reallocate office space and reallocate some spaces here. So we've been able to do that all within the scope of our budget here and be able to get, if we need a new desk or we need a new computer or we need, anything like that, we're able to fit that out right here and get them ready to go. And so it's been exciting work. We hear hammers and nails and so forth upstairs every now and then just to get things done. But we can fit these new positions right in here. And so we're excited about that. And it's been working out really, really well. So thank you, Ms. Husseini, for all the work on that, because it had to start now so that we were prepared for these positions later on. The last one, the Civil Rights EDI Coordinator, we've had a tough time filling. It's a half-time position. We did advertise it, and we had a tough time filling it. It's a required position. Districts have to have an EDI Coordinator. Right now, Mr. Ford, our Assistant Superintendent, has been filling that role. And we put it out there as a half-time position. We couldn't find somebody. And so we are not going to be filling that position, and we put those responsibilities on the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. That's a perfect intersection for the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources to be able to work with EDI issues in the school system, whether it become disputes among faculty, disputes among teachers and administration. They can work that out. And it's an excellent opportunity to have that required position filled. And so we were able to redirect the $30,000 into another position, which we needed help with. Currently in the budget already, not new, we have a half-time grants specialist. We manage a lot of grants in the system, as you all know. And having a dedicated person looking at those grants, making sure that we're following all of the state requirements on the grants, looking for new grants, new opportunities, is critical. We posted that position. Similarly, we had a hard time finding somebody. And so we will add that $30,000, making it a full-time grants position, and hopefully attract more quality candidates that way. And so at the end of the day, We're only going to be filling the ELE program coordinator, one assistant superintendent, and human resources specialist from that list. And these are recent changes based on what we've been working on over the last few weeks and what we've been seeing. So that's how the new positions are working. We're excited to have them. We're excited to have the opportunities. And they each have their different reporting responsibilities. So it's working out fantastic. If you go to the top of the page to administration, as I mentioned, those increases there at the top of the page, 397 in administration, are primarily those new administrative positions. Even if we redirect them into other areas, they're still within administration, with the exception of the special education transportation would go a different place. In terms of the human resources, just to put a better understanding of why we've created this new position and new department. Currently, our business office is handling all of our human resources concerns, and they're really above and beyond what a typical business office does in a school district, and it's important to have that extra piece. The assistant superintendent will provide help for all staff regarding benefits, as I mentioned, and they'll be able to help the principals directly in terms of solving disputes and investigations. In terms of instruction, we have the $500,000 increase in instruction, which is no surprise in a school system this size. And it also should be no surprise that 76% of our budget is devoted to instruction. And I think that's fantastic. That's exactly where we need to be. We certainly have maintenance costs and we have all the other costs that we need to do, but most of our funding is going toward instruction. In fact, over the past several years, our budget allocation for teaching staff has exceeded the state average, while our allocation for administration has actually been below the state average. And so here in Stoughton, our money is being put where it belongs, in the classroom for the students. And that's something that we're all very, very proud of. We exceed the state average also in instructional materials, equipment, and technology, which means that not only are the students getting the teachers in the classroom, but they're getting the resources that they need in the classroom. And we've seen that even in terms of our recent MCAS results. We got our MCAS results back recently, and they were up across the board. And with a special shout out to our students at the Wilkins who did really, really well. But across the board, our MCAS did well, and our students are recovering from COVID-19. As you look through the instruction lines, changes in instruction lines are always driven by regular contractual increases, what are typically called steps and lanes. Every year, teachers move along on the steps and lanes, as well as retirements and resignations. We always strive to hire a replacement for a retirement or resignation at a lower cost. And along with the rest of the country, we've seen increases in supply costs across the board, and we've incorporated them into the FY24 budget. So all of that is incorporated on those lines. Now that we're in a post-COVID world, the students are able to access field trips again, and you'll see some lines in there where we put field trips back in the budget because we want the students to have those activities and those enrichment activities. More specifically, next year, in May of 2024, our high school is going to be going through its accreditation again. So many might remember when you did the new high school, much of that was motivated by threatening the NEASC accreditation back 10 years ago, back in 2014. Well, it's 2024, they're back again, and they're going to be very excited to see the brand new Stoughton High School. And so this time, when the accreditation team comes in, Ms. Miller is going to walk around like it's awesome. There's not going to be any fear. She's going to love walking around, love showing them off the new high school, and it's a great opportunity. It does cost a little bit in the year that you do that, and so we've embedded those funds in the budget as well. So primarily, those are the changes in the instructional lines. When it comes to other school services or the operations and maintenance, you'll see that that went down a little bit because we moved some funds that were in operations and maintenance back into instruction, specifically our software support contracts. So our technology budget is in the instructional lines, and it's really appropriate in those lines, and it's not as appropriate in maintenance and operations. And those are things like our contracts for Microsoft, Adobe, disaster recovery, Gmail, those kinds of things. They belong in those instruction lines. So we didn't really cut so much of operations and maintenance. It's really kind of flat, but the decrease went into instruction. So it's more moving stuff from one place to another. As I mentioned earlier, too, our special education transportation increased due to additional students and additional costs. And so we've been tracking that all year, looking at that closely, making sure that we're monitoring that. And we already knew about some of it, so we did embed an additional $300,000 in that line. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll be looking to make some increases there as well. Recently, we chose not to fill a series of paraprofessional positions also because we wanted to make sure that we had funding available to make sure that we were handling this special education issue that we're dealing with. And so those funds will be available too. So we've been watching this closely. We can handle it within the scope of the 23 and the 24 budget that we have. But we'll be looking at those carefully. We also have a new transportation contract. We're going into the second year of that contract, and there are just normal increases as part of that. We also embedded funds in the budget from the Chapter 70 money to eliminate fees for transportation. So we immediately eliminated those, and they'll continue to be eliminated next year. So we're excited about that. There'll be no fees for transportation for next year. In the maintenance lines, you will see some different increases on the grounds. We had to take over maintenance of the turf field. It was under warranty for a while, but now we're in a position where we have to take over the maintenance of that turf field. So you'll see some of those increases as well. The next line there in fixed costs, louder, sorry, sorry. In fixed costs, that additional $14,000, that's specifically around cyber liability insurance. So I'm sure you've heard surrounding towns have had issues where they've had cyber attacks, where somebody's gone into the system. Dr. McGee, our technology director, works really, really hard to make sure that we are protected. And he does that every day, looking at our firewalls, looking at all the technology that we have. But there is also insurance for that. So in the sense that something does get through, we're insured, we're protected. Unfortunately, like all other costs, liability insurance has gone up as well. And so we've had to incorporate that. And like I said, Dr. McGee works really hard to mitigate our cyber risk, but we do have the insurance so that we can feel confident every day that if something happens, we're protected. And the last thing in the budget is added district tuition, and you'll notice that that went down. Our tuitions actually went up a little bit, but then we received another $200,000 or $300,000 in circuit breaker reimbursement. And so we apply that right to the budget, and that allows us to save money in the FY24 budget for next year. So that was a wonderful thing. If you do have more students in special education, added district placements, we receive more circuit breaker coverage, and we account for that right here in the budget. So that's all of the lines, kind of is an overview, macro. I'm happy to answer specific questions about them, or if we want to do, something else first, I'm open to whatever makes the most sense. Sorry, I'm always used to looking at you, Mrs. Grovey. I got to look at Mr. Nook. There you
Look the
go.
same place you were looking the other night, right over there. She said we had to do that to make it easy for you.
Do
Thank
you have
you.
any questions from the committee? Yes, Joel.
The new hire for the Assistant Superintendent of Technology and Maintenance, is that somebody that Ryan's going to be reporting to, or is Ryan still working for you guys? Or
He is. We did not hire that one. So that's the assistant superintendent we chose.
tell us
Sure,
again what that is?
sure. So we eliminated it. So originally, it was
Oh,
going,
you're not gonna-
we're not hiring it.
We
No,
eliminated the
no.
positions, no longer in the budget.
All right.
Yeah, she
Okay,
said, yeah.
fine, thank you. And I think you've answered pretty much most of the questions I had before. The athletic director now has an athletic coordinator.
That was a,
Seems to be new.
it was a position we've had. It was funded out of our athletic revolving account. And so now we funded into the budget to give that more permanence.
So if you're not gonna hire somebody for the assistant superintendent of technology and maintenance, is that you're maintaining the same budget, or are you gonna go down?
No, we'll maintain the same budget because I mentioned earlier, we do have known needs in special education transportation. And so we know that we're going to have to likely transfer some funds into special education transportation. The other thing is, and this committee knows this, superintendent, school committee will be looking for a new superintendent, and that'll provide some funding for them in that search and to find somebody.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the committee? Mark?
Yes, thank you. I see on the food services, again, it's 0 for this year. Well, for next year, I'm sorry. So does that mean free lunches again for the students?
It seems that way. So we were able to do it this year. Right now, as they're putting together the state budget, there's a lot of conversation about continuing that, and we're very optimistic that they'll continue it. It's been very successful, but it'll be part of the '24 state budget.
Thank you.
You good, Mark? Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, can I just ask, just
Sure.
two quick ones? Based on some of the spending reports that we got from Bill Rowe for the spending through January, I just wanted to see two lines, that computer software. So it looks like we had spent like $623,000 through January or so. Budget next year is $745,000. So it seems like if we continue at the same rate, we'd be well above what next year's budget's going to be. Do we have a way to cover that, or is that just timing of when the licenses renew, or what?
You answered your question beautiful. So what happens is we renew most of those at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
So most of those are timed to renew at the beginning of the fiscal year or in September. There might be a few that still trickle in during the year. But I think most of that money has been spent, and that's appropriate. That's what we'd expect to see at this point.
Okay. And then just one more about the special ed transportation. So it seems like we're going to be significantly under or over budget next year. How are we going to cover all that? So if we're at about 1.3 million through January, we have a budget of 1.7 million next year. We have like a 900,000 shortfall, 100,000 for the assistant superintendent. There's quite a bit more, though, that I think we're missing.
And we have, right now, we have earmarked 494,000 from the unfilled paraprofessional positions.
Okay.
So that is getting us most of the way there.
Okay.
And then special education changes almost on a daily rate. So we're also looking at ways that we might be able to double students up if we can. If we can find a cheaper vendor, we're going to do that. We're always looking to reassess those lines.
Yeah.
So those are known encumbrances right now. We actually spent quite a bit of the last couple of days looking at those and double checking those. But we know that over the next 4 months, those are going to change as well. So, I'm 600,000 there, so I feel like we're getting close to what we need to do to cover.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, the reason that we have that extra $400 and some odd thousand dollars is we stopped hiring paraprofessionals in January, and we were made aware of the issue with the insurance. And we were trying to find ways to cut, so we stopped filling positions, and thought that that would be something if we, had to come to the table, we were looking to try to bring some of that forward. Obviously, you got the report that came out today, and we saw the number, and we were kind of like, okay, we really need to figure this out and buckle down. But that's why we actually had that amount, so we were lucky to be able to be in that position.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you for the question, Adam. Laura, you have a question?
I do. So did I hear you correctly when you said that when positions at the school are vacated, you try to backfill them at a lower cost
If I can,
possible?
sure. As
And
long
then
as it's
you
not a
also
chemistry
said
teacher.
that you've had some challenges with backfilling some positions. Do you feel like that approach is limiting you in being able to fill those positions? And is that a strategy that's actually working for the schools? And then the second part of my question is, how's retention with teachers that you have? Is there a retention problem?
Sure. Let me answer the first question first.
Yeah.
I think certainly trying to hire somebody at a lower step is my first approach. But clearly, some positions are more competitive than others. Like I mentioned, chemistry or physics, or a specialized special education position or something like that. So where I have to go a little bit higher, I'm going to use those as the opportunities to go a little bit higher, knowing that I have to hire some of the others lower. But it's not at all costs. So I want to find the best person for the job. I always want to find the best person for the job. So we look at multiple factors as we're going through that. In terms of the second question, teacher retention, I'm not seeing a whole lot of resignations. Typically, if somebody leaves, it's because a family event has changed. A spouse has moved, far enough away that they can't commute back and forth. And usually, those are the reasons that I'm hearing. That there's some life event that has made it impossible for the person to keep their job, and so they're moving on. But it's not necessarily because of dissatisfaction here.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You good with that, Laura?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Chet, do you have a question?
Nope, no questions, thank you.
Dave, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Vaughn.
You're welcome.
Through you, And thank you for coming tonight. It seems like you spend a lot of time in this room for many, many hours. I appreciate us being able to do this tonight. But last night's meeting, you announced new Chapter 70 money. I guess what I'm curious about is that something we are voting for in the annual, or is that a supplemental coming in the fall? Like, when do we address the Chapter 70 changes?
So we did talk about that last night. We talked about potentially coming in this meeting, which is why we're all here, to talk about that. It looks like we know that we have the SOA, which is the Student Opportunity Act, that we have to fill out. The state came to us to ask us what we did with the Chapter 70 money that came in last year. So we had to provide information on that and specifics, and then obviously they'll come back and audit that to see if in fact we did do that. So we went out to the state on Thursday to ask, right? The numbers came out for that. It looks like the additional Chapter 70 aid that would be coming in for schools is $4,944,752. It's a lot. So we talked about that, and I don't know if anybody watched the meeting last night. We also talked about that. Talked about the fact that in January, we halted hiring positions because we knew that there was an issue with insurance. And, we wanted to try to do as much as we can to try to fill the gap and help in any way we could, and get a seat at the table to be able to talk about that at some point. Hearing what we heard last week about how much money we were expected to get, we talked about publicly last night that what we felt, and that's why we're all here, and we're not sure if this is the right place to make that vote or to do that. But we would like to consider moving funds to cover the issue with the health insurance to the health trust fund, and using the additional money that money that's coming in to the town to do so. It's a good thing fiscally for Stoughton, for the taxpayers, and also it's an additional $5 million coming in that we didn't expect. And we didn't expect that for last year. I remember Dr. Grimm, when she reached out, she goes, "Oh my gosh, is this for real?" She's like, "Holy cow, doctor," right? It was like a shock. So this is a lot, and we obviously are understanding that, where people talk recession and things like that, and while they do that, we think that it would be prudent for the school committee at this time to make a vote to support that money to cover in the health trust fund the gap of the $2 million. I don't know what that number in particular is. 2-3. But I think that would be something, and I know we discussed it last night, and it's something for us to discuss here publicly. And then if we can consider, we could maybe take a vote to support that movement. I'll let these folks talk too about that.
I guess I just want to make sure I understand. So that money is going to be used in some way during this annual meeting. Some portion of that money will be voted on this annual town meeting, or it's not going to be something that's pushed off. There's going to be some appropriation done out of that in this coming vote.
So what will happen is the funds, and you can speak more to this from a business manager or Christine, but the funds will come in after annual town meeting. So the governors, this is what's hard about our process with the budget. I wish our budget was like other school districts. It's after the governor's budget comes out, because then you can this is all kind of figured out way beforehand, and then we're kind of like, we can all breathe. So we can make a vote to state that we won't come forward, right? Because whenever there's a special town meeting, we come forward with articles for that additional money. We figure out what that budget's going to be. We plan it out. We say, this is what we're going to add. This is what we're going to do. So we can figure out, and again, this might not be the meeting to do it. We may need to do it at a special meeting or our meeting on the 14th. But to support that, or to kind of, I don't want to say earmark because you can't earmark.
No, but I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is because if it is something that's going to be in scope for the annual, then I was going to suggest by the end of this meeting tonight that we continue the hearing so that we could look at a new fresh look at, oh yeah, we're just a few weeks from, sending the book out to everybody, and this is in scope, and there's going to be something done with it.
The only thing to keep in mind is the money comes in at the beginning of July.
Well, right,
So
but
that's-
we vote in May for things that are going to start on July 1st.
Okay, and that's totally fine,
That's what
totally
we do.
fine, but we're willing to do whatever, which is why we brought it here. And I just do want to give them an opportunity to speak. about it, if there's anything that they want to add or any opinion before we, it was an idea I threw on them last night at our school committee meeting, so I do want to make sure that they're on the same page with that. So I'll hand it down.
Well,
We have-
thank you, Madam Chair Gropey, for bringing this to the Finance Committee for discussion. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the whole school committee for bringing this forward. Do you have any other questions, Dave?
I have a lot of questions.
Oh, come on.
Not surprised.
Sent like a list of them. We answered them all.
Why don't we take a question?
It was funny how obsolete the answers were when you got
So
the new
funny.
money in, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, so much for the,
Well, Dave, we'll take a question from John.
okay.
He might ask you a question, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want you to steal everyone's question.
I doubt it, but along these lines with this additional Chapter 70 money, and I just need it to be explained because
Yep.
I'm not as in tune to the school side, if you will, or I did that on purpose, to the school budgets and how you fill them, but when that notice came out, you're also had net school spending increased by 6
Yeah.
million plus. The deficit between your additional money and the net school spending
I'll explain that.
was 1,431,970. So can you kind of explain how that works? And I mean, I appreciate that, as far as trying to help out with the health trust and all that. And frankly, I don't know exactly where that stands because I know it was discussed about using the free cash to make up the difference for the 2,074,000.
Yep.
And I know what certain things that were discussed about some of the articles has kind of gone by the wayside right now. So
Yep.
I'm not sure. There was enough free cash allotted for town meeting articles. Actually, more than what was needed to cover the deficit. So,
Yep.
but certainly if there's extra money, trying to suck it into stabilization or put some money away and get ready for other items that might come up. But yes, if you could
Yeah.
just explain how that all works. If they might have given you another 5, but they're telling you got to spend another 6 3/4 or 6
Right.
3/8.
So what I'll do, so I appreciate the comment about, the money and potentially put it in stabilization and all that, but I do want to echo, like, we always do the right thing at budget season. We always do. And we were prepared to do that even with our budget and cut, like I mentioned, we stopped hiring all those positions in January, and that was based on the Chapter 70 money we got in the fall. So we're willing to talk that out here. I know it's unconventional to do it here, but we can talk it out and we can figure out what the best thing is to do, and we will vote. And there's 5 of us, and everyone can vote on how they feel, whatever the solution is, and we can go from there with that, totally open to that. What I'll do is, I'm just gonna give a little insight as to what we look like with this money, in what that net school spender, like what's required and all that. And then what I'll do is, Dr. Rabb, can I hand it to you to give like a full explanation, kind of like of Chapter 70, what, where we were, what the increase was and that? Because I do think it's important, because we hear Chapter 70, and at times people will give like a quick explanation or say it's not the school's money, or they'll say it's money, the town's money, or it's this, it's that. Well, there's this thing called Student Opportunity Act, and the Student Opportunity Act, we are required to have to answer to. Mr. Ford is the one who actually fills it out, and it's very detailed, and it's something that, it's a public process, and we end up having to say, this is what we're doing, we're hiring people to do this, and it's certain criteria within that Student Opportunity Act, special ed, ELL, special education, there's all these components, and we have to be able to explain that with this money, this is what we did, this is what we're doing, and show basically proof later that this is what it is. They just came out to us last week for us to show what we did with the money that came this last year. So where we were, and I'd say I'd give it 7 to 9 years, an average, we were at 30% above net school spending. So there's like a line of where you have to be at net school spending, and Dr. Rizzi kind of got us to that place where she always continuously said, that extra 4 will be that sweet spot, because we'll get us here and we'll always be consistent and be able to provide everything we can for students. Last year, when we received that $4 million in funding, that bar had been raised higher. We were kind of shorted, as Dr. Rabb will kind of mention that when he goes through what the percentages and where we were. But we dropped down to 24% above net school spending when that happened, because they didn't fill that whole gap that would have kept us at 30%. What I want to do is kind of mention that this money that's coming in, wouldn't bring us to the 30%. Even if we took this 4 or 5 million, it would keep us consistent at 24 based on the increase that they gave us in net school spending. But in addition to, I just want to tell you guys the surrounding towns where they are, so that when you hear people say they don't need the money, or that's the town's money, they're above net school spending, I think it's important for you to hear the towns, hear about what their percentage is, and then understand the school districts in those towns and where that falls. So we're at 24% now, but the year before, we were at 30%. Canton was at 49.6%. Easton was at 26.5%. Randolph, 31.4%. And Sharon, 50%. So when you look at where those percentages are, where they fall in the state in rankings, and what they have for programming, I think Stoughton does an amazing job. We've always done the best we could with the least money we could get, because we were always frugal and knew what we were doing. But I just wanted to point that out, because there is kind of like a whole method to the net school spending and where you really need to be, because if you fall down, you're starting to cut, and you're cutting summer programs and all the things that we've built that are free for students that need it. And the last thing I'll state is, by us foregoing this additional $5 million and looking to see what we can do, or potentially moving a little bit of it into the budget to stabilize that, which we'll all talk about, we're going to drop to 15% above net school spending without taking that 5%. I just want to kind of note that, because it's a gap, like where we were to where we're going, and other towns that are rating much higher. But Dr. Rapp can give you a little more information in terms of like the dollars and what we were required, and et cetera.
Madam Chair Gropey, before
Yeah.
we can continue.
Sorry,
I
yeah.
just wanted to, you said it, and you said it a little bit fast. I was trying to write it down.
Okay, sorry.
Canton is 49% over net school spending?
Yeah, Sharon's 50,
50, okay, and Easton was 26.5.
Yes.
And Randolph,
We
I
ran-
wrote down as 30-something, but what was the number?
31. They're 31. They'll be higher. They're higher than us, Randolph schools.
That's, they spend 31% over net school requirement?
Yes, but
Sharon's 50? Oh, okay.
no, it's not 50. But Randolph was 31%. But
And Sharon is 50% over.
correct. And then Easton, I guess I'll mention, it's 26.5%, but they've gone for an override multiple times because they need more money for the school budget, and it doesn't pass. And they use Stoughton as their comparison at their town meeting, their meetings at Stonehill, to kind of show what Stoughton has for their budget and what they want to add. And they didn't get the overrides. So it's still, I guess, when you look at it, apples to apples.
They won't be comparing Stoughton next year.
They will compare Stoughton next year. Stoughton's a good school district. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dr. Rabb.
Sure,
Sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Grover, and through you, Mr. Inokian.
All right, thank
Unless you
you.
want me to. Yeah. So just to provide a little bit of a primer on Chapter 70 and required net school spending, I think everybody here knows what Chapter 70 funding is. Chapter 70 funding is supplemental funding that comes into the school district from the state in order to offset the budget. And that funding comes in based on the town's capacity to pay. They do calculations based on the town's capacity to contribute to the school budget, as well as looking at all the different areas that we have to spend money on: preschool, middle school, high school, and so forth, EL population, low-income population. Up until 2 years ago, like Mrs. Gropey said, we were 30% above required school spending. So required school spending, if you were actually at zero, at the actual minimum, that's a very minimum threshold. That doesn't give you all of the opportunities that our students currently have. We would have to eliminate our Nights of Summer program. We would have to eliminate the enrichment programs. We wouldn't be able to maintain the low class sizes that we've been able to maintain in Stoughton if we were at that zero threshold. And so that's why most towns are above it. It's not unusual to be above it. You're not allowed to be below it, so you get yourself in trouble with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education if you're actually below it. So most towns will make sure that they're above it, not only because they have to be, but because it's the right thing to do for their students. Up until the Student Opportunities Act a couple of years ago, the net school spending requirements would go up a little, and the Chapter 70 funding would go up a little, and it was kind of commensurate. And so we could stay at that 30% level pretty regularly. The school committee would go to special town meeting, capture the additional Chapter 70 funding, and we would stay right at that level. What happened in FY23, you alluded to, is they gave us an extra $4 million in Chapter 70 money, but increased our required net school spending by $5.5 million, creating a structural deficit. So what happened is we went from 30% to 24% this year, And we're still maintaining, and we're still doing okay. For FY '24, they just put the numbers out last Thursday. We were thrilled to see an additional $4.9 million in Chapter 70 money for next year. But at the same time, they increased our required net school spending by $6.3 million. So creating that same structural deficit. I promise I'm almost done. So what happened was, we created our FY '24 budget based on the 1.9% increase. We have those funds available. We created that budget in good faith. Keeping it just where it is and not taking the extra 4.9, but we have no choice but to accept the fact that our required net school spending is now at $6.3 million higher. It drops our percentage above to 15%. That's about as low as you ever want to go and be able to maintain the services that Stoughton has come to expect. And so that's where we're at right now. We wouldn't be able to sustain that again in FY '25. And so I think, like Mrs. Gropey said, this is a one-time opportunity to take a look at that and not go back to special town meeting in the fall. But that's not going to happen again. And personally, I just think those structural deficits will catch up to us eventually. We'll have to make sure we're maintaining, if not 15, closer to 20 or 24 where we've been. So
We will have to maintain it. We'll next year have to start coming, we had it's a flat budget this year. You see the 1.9, but it's essentially the Chapter 70 money that, we had the 2 articles for last year, as we promised. We're keeping our word, and we're doing what we said we would do. And then, again, we're trying to be, we're all one Stoughton. We're trying to do the right thing, and we know that we're in a, potentially we'd be going on hard times as well. And this is just unprecedented for this to continually happen, but also we're aware of the insurance, the issue with the health insurance. And we just want to make sure that the taxpayers in Stoughton don't have to bear burden on things. And it would never be the intent of the school committee. We just want to try to do the right thing and hoping that we can talk this through. And then we can figure out what the best situation is to do for the town and do that here at this meeting. And again, next year, the school committee will be coming back with not a flat budget. That can be guaranteed. But then keep in mind that you're getting $5 million extra in this year. That money will be coming next year as well. And Chapter 70 always comes in a little more because they always kind of raise the bar a little more each year. This, hopefully a little more. That was, these past 2 years is unexpected. But I just want to kind of preface that next year you have to expect that the school committee will have to start building on the programs and everything else that they need to do.
Right, thank you. Dave, did you want to continue your question, or John?
Are you all set?
Yeah, if you go too long, I'll jump in again.
You good? Thank you. Through you, Vaughn, I want to thank you for the explanation on the Chapter 70.
Please use the mic.
The mic doesn't, I'll try to talk loud. I'll just talk loud.
Dave Laurie talking loud.
Thank you for saying that you're concerned about the taxpayers not having to burden some of the things that you mentioned, like with the health fund and all those things, and you're looking to help that out. The Chapter 70, from what I understand the conversation last night, is that it's impacted by the poverty of the students who are coming in. Could you tell us what that poverty level was when you set your budget, and what happened to it when you just got the new money in?
Sure. So we actually moved into the next category. And so as far as the state's concerned, about 50% of our students are at the poverty level. And so of that $6.3 million, $2.6 million was for low-income students. And so a significant portion of that
50%?
Right now, what they're saying is that 50% of our students are low income, based on the calculations.
From what you said was going to be what percentage?
Last year, I believe it was a range of between 42 and 47. So there's not to get too in the weeds, there's 12 different categories of low income. And so last year we were group 8, which is 42 to 47% low income. This year, okay, there you go. Last year was 47.6%. This year it's 50. So that was
So
the
it went up
increase.
2.4%.
Yes, and they gave us $2 million as part of the Chapter 70 allocation.
All right. But also, I want to the way in which we kind of get into our jargon of finance, they talk about, flat budgeting, level service funding, all these things, just to make sure we're like semantics are clear, is that the level service means you're increasing your budget to maintain the same amount of service. And that's kind of what I think we saw, because it went up 1.9 from the year before. So that's a level service budget. A flat budget is kind of more akin to what happened on the municipal side. They went from, almost completely zero increase. So in other words, it's probably going to have some impact on services because it's not level service, it's flat. So it's hard to maintain the same level when you're increasing your budget zero. So I just want to make sure, like, semantics are right, because I've seen it in some of the documentation about the flat, aspect, but it's really a level service, I think, is a better description of it.
Whatever you want to call it, David, absolutely, but we probably should have just done the 4, and in retrospect, we initially were going to just take the full 4 million at the special, and we were just going to put the articles in at the time, and it probably would have made it smoother to do that. It was my recommendation. I was trying to be fiscally responsible again, sorry. And I thought that if we kind of just broke it out and that 4 million, instead of just doing it all at once and then not having, there were so many articles that, it just tends to be so many articles that we end up having that we just said, let's take that money and put that towards those articles. Totally get what you're saying. I guess we'll just say the $1.9 million instead of
The
saying
level
flat.
service.
Yeah, whatever
That's
works
fine.
for the FinCom.
No, that's fine. So I think
Yeah.
the following question has to do with, how you plan to help the town on the health fund. So the 2 million that was short, the town was going to use free cash instead of articles. So if you say, hey, guess what? We can take out of the 5 million extra that we didn't know was coming and take 2 million off the top of that.
Yeah.
What then happens to the freed up money? I guess that's a question for a different meeting.
Right.
Because are they going to then look at reinstalling the articles that were going to be based on free? In other words, are we using the freed up free cash now for, or is it going to go to stabilization, or is it going to actually be used for articles? I think that's going to open up that question.
Can I answer that?
You already know the answer to that. Okay.
John has an answer.
Yeah, I'll give you an answer.
Okay.
When we go through the warrant, it's the finance committee that makes the recommendations on how to
Right.
fund any of those articles.
Okay.
No matter what anybody might think, how they want to do it, it's still the finance committee working with Bill and what we have, for money coming back or this or that. But it's the finance committee who makes the final recommendation.
Right, but we heard also that there was going to be dismissed articles.
No,
heard
we
that.
didn't, because none of them every article was inserted in the warrant, and that's why we're gonna hear them all.
Okay.
And it matters not, and we got that legal opinion from town council that, nope, they voted to put them in, we have to hear them, and we'll go through it. And it's the standard process that the finance committee, when they're doing their hearings and so forth, when they go to make their recommendations, that's where they choose what they want to recommend for funding.
All right.
And you see where town meeting goes, but that's where the responsibility lies.
Okay.
I know what the intent was.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's
I
how
understand.
it would have gone.
All right, so one of the things I just want to vet, I have
Sure.
an idea in my head. I don't know whether it's going to fly, so I'm going to try it out.
Oh, man.
There was articles in the special town meeting, and I thought it was fascinating, and it was Dr. Rabb who said, guess what, we have the supplemental, and 75% of that was used for the operating budget that was coming off of the ESSER grant, and it was going to continue the FY23 budget. And 25% went to capital. And those were articles that, so in other words, the funding source for the articles was Chapter 70 money.
Yes, correct.
So it set to me a precedent that, yes, you can actually appropriate against Chapter 70 for articles, especially when they're for school articles. They're school articles. In other words, one of the pillars that is a responsibility of the school committee and administration is to take care of buildings as well as the educational plan
Dave,
and
Dave.
the faculty.
I'm
So
gonna-
my question.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I'm going to interrupt you for a second because we covered this before, and if I remember correctly, the discussion was that 25% of the money was not used in the budget because 25% of the year had already gone by.
Right.
So that left the 25% on the table to spend on something
I
else.
understand.
I'm just
trying to make
reminding you of the
I
discussion we
understand.
had at the
Well,
Finance Committee.
The point I'm trying to make is that if you take a look at we want to make sure that we carve out Chapter 70 and demonstrate our responsibilities to the SOA, that building maintenance or reconstruction or new buildings like a South School are fair appropriations against Chapter 70 because it's part of your responsibility, and it actually goes to how you fulfill your educational plans, like a triennial plan or whatever it is. But your buildings are a requirement to meet those goals.
Right, the requirement of the town. And in the school committee, yes, we do decide on how, like, what's prioritized within the district. We vote on, what happens on the grounds. We have that authority and that remit, absolutely. But at the end of the day, right, what we did last year simply was extra money came in July, and it went just into an account. It was not Chapter 70 anymore. We got extra money that came into the town of Stoughton, right? It was Chapter 70 money, and we knew, okay, so we're on the hook. We know there's this cash. We need to figure out how we're going to spend it. For all Uncle Sam knows is the money that paid for those 2 articles was part of the revenue funding that was given to the school budget, because it was all money that was basically out of the same account at that point. Like, what we're saying is, I understand what you're saying. We tried to be prudent in what we were doing and be mindful, but we also had considered that at the time to put that full $4 million into the budget and to add I just want to, I know, and I know you've been great
I was
with.
the only
Dave,
one.
Let me finish.
Mr. Laurie, could you let her finish, please?
No,
Thank
no,
you.
and you've been great, and but, so what we need to do is we need to just try to, we need to try to figure out at where we are right now, what's best for the town, what we need to do. And I just want to say that I know we're talking about articles, and yes, we have an article that, the school committee is sponsoring, 2 of them. One's the CPC's funding, but one that we're sponsoring, but we'll get to that and we'll talk about that. We've already gone out to the state legislature to ask for that funding, like we did with the walkie-talkie. Like, we're prudent in what we're doing, and we'll talk about all that, but I think that what we need to consider here is this money right now, what is best for this town of Stoughton is to look at that 2.2? 2.3 something. Thank you. The 2.3 something. We need to figure out how we're going to vote for that, to allocate that.
Health deficit was $2,074,000.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, you seem very
And we
angry.
had $2.5 million. I'm not yelling. I
Okay,
wanna
no,
make
I know,
sure.
but I'm like,
I'm
holy
just
cow.
trying to
I'm like,
project
I'm
my
like, whatever
voice.
you say.
Finance Committee, come on.
If I'm not mistaken, the revenue sheet had $2.5 million set aside for annual town meeting articles.
Yeah,
And I believe on the 7th of February, when they were doing the warrant, and Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the latest number for the deficit in the health trust was $2,074,000.
okay. So whatever that number
And
is.
that's what we were looking to take, or that's what they were looking to take, the free cash
Yep.
to alleviate the,
Okay, whatever that number is, if you guys have that, we'll talk about that, we'll figure that out. The remainder, we'll figure out from a stabilization standpoint, whatever that is, right? You guys are FinCom. You guys are the keepers of the money, or the keepers of the keys.
oh, don't say that.
Keepers of the keys, I don't know,
I don't
but you
even
guys
get
are
to do that at all.
FinCom. We're here because you know best what we need to do and how we need to do it, and that's why we brought this to the meeting.
Okay.
We hoped we could have other public meetings and do all those things and whatever, but we're here, and what we need to do is we just need to figure this out, and we need to just, whatever the money goes towards, whatever, we're looking for you to give that recommendation, and we'll vote, and if we support it, great, and if we don't, then we don't, but we need to just have that discussion. I think talking about the what-ifs and we can do this and we can do that, I totally get it, but I think our town is in need right now.
And just to be clear, when I threw that out about stabilization,
Yeah,
it wasn't saying that's where it has to go.
Right.
It was just
that's
one
why I
of the
wanna
things that's
listen.
possible, you know?
Do I
Right.
still have the floor,
Exactly.
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Now we can go to your next question.
No, it's just to finish what I was trying to say, that the amount of money that you take, instead of letting it get absorbed into the operating budget, which is like the salaries and all those like costs that go into the operating budget.
Yeah.
If some of that is always carved out for capital, then it won't get absorbed into the operating budget, which is much harder to take back away from that, and especially when you have large capital projects coming online, that's where the taxpayer gets the most benefit, because you were not having to knock on
Right.
their door for another debt exclusion, because
Right.
you already carved out enough within the operating budget to be able to go to debt service. That's where I was going with that whole line of thought.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that everybody agrees with me. I'm just saying that's where I'm coming from when I talk about it.
And I get what you're, no, I
Well,
think, I
thank you,
get what
Dave.
you're
I was
saying.
just trying to
Yeah,
prevent a
that-
bunch of overtalk here. That's all.
Not over talk.
No, no, I'm
I
saying
was trying to
multiple
just
people
get
speaking.
to. I was just trying to get to my point.
Did you have another question?
Guys have any?
I have a lot of questions. Yeah, one of the things that came up in 2 meetings ago, you had an emergency meeting, and there was talk of through the principal at the high school, a wall of flags. How much does it cost? I know you're getting free. We love free, by the way, so it's great that you're getting free flags. But aren't there any costs involved with like presenting those flags, poles that you have to put them on, some kind of a presentation on a wall? Like, are there
So I'm happy to
costs?
answer that, even though it's not money that's coming out of the budget.
Well, that's what I was
Let-
asking.
let me-
No, I'm
Where is the source?
happy to, because it's a good question.
Hang on a second. Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
We want to try to keep the discussion somewhat relevant to
It is.
FY '24.
I promise it is. I want to hear
All right.
whether or not it's
So, yeah.
being used
All right,
within
thank
the
you.
budget or any
Yeah,
capital
so-
sources. What are the sources for that?
Yeah, so to answer your question, they're not on poles, they're flat on walls, and they're smaller, and they're country of origin flags. So the country of origin of where students came from are the flags that are going up. So they're not like a full-size thing. If you go through other high schools, Norton High School, I don't know if our student is here, our student, she'll be here soon, but she's been to a high school, this is something, it's a welcoming thing, and it's to celebrate the countries of origin of where kids came from, and our maintenance staff puts it up. So it's the workers that we have in our schools that are putting them up
Well,
during
yeah.
the day.
Thank you, through you, Vaughn. It's just, that it's a zero cost.
Correct.
It's a zero cost project.
And Dr. Wright, you can jump in for
Sure, I mean, it's a minimal cost for the flags themselves, but it's absorbed within the principal's supply budget. It's not going
Yeah.
to be a huge
Principal
cost.
supply
Yeah.
budget.
Sure, it's
Oh, okay. All right, so I have questions on the article. Okay, wait. Oh, I was going to ask whether or not you were going to put back in the extra assistant superintendent with the new Chapter 70. Why is it staying out of the budget?
No, we're leaving it out because we really need to take a look at the special education transportation, as I mentioned earlier. And so, the committee will likely consider transferring those funds into that line to cover our special education transportation issues, because we know we're dealing with them this year, but they're certainly going to be with us next year as well.
Okay. There was an interesting comment last night, so I just want to bring it back, because a lot's been said about the net school spending and about the 30%, 24%, the 15%. I want to just, tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, because there's going to be some impact when it shrinks, when that extra percentage shrinks down. However, it was said that, like, you look at it from, what is the SOA from the state in their dictates to the town? Here's what we expect, and here's, what are you actually doing with your money? But at the end of the day, it was said that, don't worry in terms of impact on the children, because they're getting an increase in the number, and it's going to only bring goodness to the way that the classrooms are handled for the children. So we don't have to worry about the impact on children when we talk about net school spending and the per pupil, and those things are all just mechanical conversations about what the state says, what we're actually doing, and all those things. But it's not really like a direct impact on
It
a
is.
child learning.
It
All
is,
right,
but
so
Mr.
what-
Ford will answer, because I know you spoke to him after our meeting last night.
So the Student Opportunities Act came about a few years ago, and it was an act where the Commonwealth allocated a significant addition to our Chapter 70 funding. But it wasn't just free money, because what they required us to do was put a plan in place to specifically address things within the district, number one being learning gaps with specific populations in the town. And so we develop a plan, multifaceted plan. What we do is we do a report every year, and we let them know how their investment is paid off within our school district. Did we deliver on what we said we're going to do? If not, how are we remediating that moving forward? So we're always working towards this goal of eliminating learning gaps. So, and the thing we did talk about was this year there was something interesting that came through when I was setting up to do the report, because we just actually got the report documents last week. And what they asked us to do is actually account for whatever our increase in Chapter 70 was this past year. So we did get that huge allocation in Chapter 70. It was a product of two things. It was a product of SOA, as well as the increase in primarily our poverty level in town and changing that index, going from a 7 to an 8, and this year an 8 to a 9. What we don't necessarily fully understand, though, is what that accountability piece is. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at the $4 million. We're going to count where all of it went. We actually put in a call to the state to say, what does this mean to us? Because we know that we're going to have to develop another plan next year. We're going to have to fund the plan. We're going to go right back after the gap closing and other things. So what are you looking for in the accountability, and how does that then relate to us? And we couldn't actually get a clear picture. Now, Chapter 70 funding is Chapter 70 funding, but we're not quite sure what our responsibilities are moving forward with that additional allocation, and then what we have to account for, and what they're using the information they're gathering from us for. So is it going to have a future impact on funding for us, for the state in aggregate? It's just, it's an interesting question that they don't have an answer to. We were the first people to make the phone call, and I'll tell you, as soon as we saw that accountability piece, we needed answers to this. In talking to their rep, you know, they said, we're anticipating a lot of calls on this. We're actually looking for additional guidance from the commissioner to fill that piece in. And we'll know before the next plan is submitted. But right now, we need a little more clarity in terms of what they're looking for us in terms of accountability for this additional funding that we're receiving. And I think what they're looking for is to determine whether towns are using it for education or it's going someplace else. But that's all going to shake out as further inquiries from towns and school districts pour in, because we really need to know in the future what's expected for us and what we have to use in terms of building out the next plan and what the accountability is.
Sure, Dave, continue.
Thank you, through you,
You're
Vaughn.
welcome.
I just want to make sure, because when I hear the term structural deficit, I think of it in terms of, you know, like, we talk about free cash and having dependency on free cash to fund a budget. That's a structural deficit because it's not a good source. You don't know what's going to come in year after year, but yet your out years are dependent on a source that's not good. Is there anything about the SOA that forces a structural deficit when you take net school spending from 30 to 15% or 24 to 15%? How is that a structural deficit in the way you're handling the revenue you have?
Through you, Mr. Inokian, I can answer that question. I was using the term broadly. So I was using the term simply comparing what comes in from Chapter 70 compared to our increase in net school spending, and just trying to suggest that if our increases in net school spending are outpacing our Chapter 70 year to year to year, it creates that situation where we go from 30 to 24 to 15. We're at the point now where 15 is as low, in my opinion, as you can go and still maintain services. So I'm just trying to warn is probably too strong a word, but just make everybody aware that this is the last year that we can sustain that. And I think in terms of allocation of Chapter 70, insurance and employee benefits is part of that calculation, the net school spending calculation. So the fact that we're talking about using some Chapter 70 money for that purpose is perfectly appropriate.
Thank you for that. I think that about does it until articles come up. I think I'm okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Dave. Elliot, you have any questions?
I'm all set, thank you, Warren.
Bob?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. As far as the grouping is concerned, you indicated we were in Group 7, we're in 8 and going towards 9. Where is that data coming from as far as the 50% low income? Where is that coming from?
It's right from the foundation budget that they put together. And so when they do the foundation budget, they let us know exactly what the low income numbers are. So last year, we were Group 8 at 47.6. I'm reading it right from a Department of Education report. And this year, we went to the next group, which is 50.9% low income. And I do know that as part of these calculations, they did lower the bar a little bit for low income. but at the same time, we are seeing more and more low-income families in Stoughton. And so that's part of the SOA, to make sure that we're taking care of those families. But that data comes right from the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was, you had indicated grant individuals that track the grants. Are those grant writers as well?
Absolutely, that'll be the expectation of the role.
Okay, thank you.
You good, Bob?
Yeah, for now.
Adam, you have any questions? Mark? Laura, any questions? Eric, any questions? Chet?
No, I'm good. I was going to echo Bob's comments.
Joel, any questions? Diane, you have any questions?
I do have one for Sandra. I can talk loud.
Okay.
I always make you shut my door. The percentages you gave us,
Yeah.
were those before or after the new amounts?
Those,
Randolph at 31 and,
that was compared where we were in 22. So 30 was where we were, and that was them in comparison. So they took the Chapter 70 money, and they brought that into their budgets. So we're waiting for those projections to come out. They haven't come out yet.
right, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Yeah, so we were higher, yeah, I get,
Everything,
yes.
yeah.
We were higher, it looked better, what I'm comparing, but we don't look as good now. Yes, correct.
John, you have any questions?
Sorry.
I have a comment, if
Oh,
you
dear.
don't mind, Mr.
That's fine.
Milky. Thank you. Through you, I'd just like to say, I would rather not see us go down that much. If, that was a sizable amount that they sent, even though they raised the bar again. I think it was pretty close last year. It was about $1.5 million different when it came in. And I'd rather see us try and keep that up a little bit rather than drop to the 15%. I don't know what it would take out of that $5 million to move it up a little. I would imagine that's still going to leave a sizable amount of money available for other things.
Yeah.
So if you were going to try, you said you were at 24, and you're going to go down to 15?
Yeah, we're at, 24 and go down to 15.
And can you give any type of a breakdown on
Ask our business manager,
what you would need
too.
out of that $5 million to incrementally go up?
Sure. Christine, our business manager, is here. I think she can.
It would be helpful afterwards, too, if you could actually send that electronically, a copy of it if you could.
Okay, I will.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome, sir.
I don't know what you did.
That's fine, I can.
Yeah.
So basically, if we would get to 20%, it'd be $2.7 million we would need. To get back to the 24, we would need $5 million, so the entire Chapter 70
So you would need
allocation.
2.7 to get to 20.
To get to 20%. And so all you have to do is split the difference to go from
Yep,
15 to 20.
yep.
Yeah.
I can handle that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the public?
The
Please.
woman in the back with the Patriots had her hand up, too. All right?
Please identify yourself for the record.
My name is Lisa Lyons, Precinct 2, and I would like to thank Dave for asking your questions because it helps us, the public, understand the process, the budget better. So thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
He's talking to you.
Thank you.
Doesn't work, Cynthia. Doesn't work.
It's for TV.
You have to speak loud.
No, the mic works. It's to
The
pick up
mic
the
is,
smack.
the mic is for the broadcast.
You're gonna have to use your teacher voice, Cynthia.
I was gonna say your town meeting voice. She's winding up.
I spent 33 years in this building. Not all good. Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. One of my roles is deputy moderator. Besides tomorrow, are you planning any other hearings in this room?
Yes, we are.
Because it's grossly inadequate. I mean, I'm sure if I called the fire department, they'd empty it out. There are people standing in the doorway, there's people out there. Is there a bigger space in the building?
We won't have a joint meeting tomorrow, so all of these desks will be gone. And it will, this was because it's a joint meeting. Normally, we wouldn't all be here. And they opt to, all of those folks wouldn't be here as well.
So
So
you
this will all be
probably-
gone. It'll be a totally different room with a bunch of chairs
So
everywhere.
you may be able to get 10 or 15 more seats in here?
Yeah, a lot more.
Because tomorrow's agenda has,
Correct.
instead of 3, it has much more.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when you're planning these things, not every member of the public is physically healthy. And I thought I had arranged access to this building on Monday. I talked to 2 different superintendent office employees, and it wasn't. If Ms. Husseini hadn't allowed me in the building, I'd still be sitting out in the front. That's something to think about. Also, I don't know why there isn't something for people with impaired hearing. There is a town hall. It's the same cable company. They should be able to provide something here. I'm not the only one in this room that's hearing impaired. I'm not the only one in this room that has impaired mobility. And I'm not the only person in this room that's visually impaired. Because it doesn't matter that I'm visually impaired. There's no warrant. There's no budget. There's no paperwork except for the agenda for the general public. Now, if you folks aren't going to use the mics, where are we going to get our information? I have nothing to look at. I'm depending on your speaking up. Now, sticking the mic here and then talking over here isn't effective. But I do have one, I believe, legitimate question. What was the enrollment that you reported to the state on October 1st of 2022?
Just bear with me 1 second, I have our enrollments right here.
I've been assured that I will have access tomorrow to the building. So unfortunately, I'll be back.
I can address both concerns, Mrs. Walsh. So she had called to make arrangements to have the building unlocked at 5:30. I don't know.
Can you be
why that
louder,
didn't-
please?
Sure. I don't know why that didn't happen. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. The building will be unlocked at 5:30 tomorrow.
Thank you.
In terms of October enrollment, our October 1, 2022 enrollment was 3597. And what we're finding is that's getting back to where we were. So in 2017, we were 3593. In 2022, we're 3597. We had taken a little dip during COVID, and now we're going right back to where we were. So.
And I understand from just general knowledge and my reading that in the pandemic years, the birth rate in this country did go down. So we will see a dip maybe in 3 or 4 years, but that's, I guess people, the more time they spend with their spouse, the less
Oh, gosh.
the less time they wanted to spend with their spouse.
You got a point there.
Thank you.
Oh, dear.
Town Manager Coulter?
It's so funny.
Town Manager Coulter?
Mr. Chairman, just be
Yes.
advised, the Great Hall should be available to you as of next Wednesday night. It'll be complete.
Yay.
Great, thank you for the update.
That's different than what you said last night,
We're ahead of schedule.
a week ahead.
We pushed them a week ahead today. They were gonna come in and start the carpeting next Monday, when they could start tomorrow. So we got them pushed up, so they'll be available.
Wish I knew that before we put the ads in, that it's going to be here on next week.
We still have time.
You can change it.
The ads are in,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Well, it'll be available if anyone needs it.
All right.
It's your building.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, well, we're going to move on.
Wait, no.
Oh, I couldn't see you back there, Mr. Murphy. Please identify yourself for the record.
Peter Murphy, 60 Peters Drive, Precinct 2, Town Meeting Rep. The question I have for you, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Superintendent of Schools. Back at the special town meeting, the question was asked, the Chapter 70 money that came to you, that big bag of dollars, where did it all go? I think people were looking for an itemized breakdown. Is that available?
I can provide a bit of that tonight, sure.
All right, well, it's not just me. I believe the other town meeting reps would also like to see that. So at some point, now you just got another bag of dollars, hopefully coming in July, correct? The 5 million? So my question is, who decides where that money goes? How does it get broken down to where it goes?
You answer it. You do the budget.
So the school committee puts together the budget and decides where the money goes. So when we knew we were going to allocate at special town meeting, the 2.9 million, we worked together with the school committee. I worked with the admin team, and then we presented that to the school committee. And so a lot of that money in the 2.9 million was around special education and low-income students, and we needed to address those concerns. So we used those funds for free transportation, as I mentioned earlier, free athletics to help low-income families. The state already provided free lunch, so we didn't have to do that. So that's where a lot of those funds went, and it also went towards special education teachers that we had been hired on the ESSER budget, but we knew that ESSER was going to be expiring in a year, and so we needed to make sure that we could put those teachers in the budget. We were seeing great returns for our special education students from those positions, and so we put those in the budget. We also put in math coaches in the budget in order to help our students make sure that they could maintain their, not only their math skills, but their skills in general.
Well, I mean, right now, I don't want to go through it line by line, but it was a case of where that was a critical question that was asked. The other question I have is the transportation. You went in, it was decided, free transportation for all students.
Yeah.
What was the bottom line of just transportation, general transportation? I realize special needs is a different
Yeah.
set of circumstances.
He's got the line number.
I've got it right here.
But just, I want to be clear, just to answer, I'm so sorry I'm being so loud. So I just want to be clear on what the process is. Dr. Rab meets with all his department heads, and they talk about, generally, when they put the regular budget together, they talk about what do we need, what's going on. They obviously take into account what's happening in the contracts and the increases that go with that. Outside of that, that money from Chapter 70, what happened was, we had a lot of stuff that was happening through the ESSER grant. The ESSER grant came after COVID-19, where there was a lot of like social emotional needs, things of that nature, so that we got these grants, and we had like a lot of special education, social emotional things that were we were providing services, and this gave us the opportunity to roll the. Am I being too loud?
No,
roll
no,
those into the
I'm
budget.
used to that.
Okay. So it gave us the opportunity to roll those into the budget and be able to continue to provide those services to students, the special ed components to that as well. We did the free busing. We last year, all the families received checks. They got reimbursed if they paid for busing. In addition to that, any sports fees, band, all those things, we gave all that back, and that get rolled into the budget, obviously, this year. But we did stuff with that as well. Hope that answer. We approve the budget. It's our budget, the school committees,
Right.
but we look for him to create the budget and to balance that budget.
So this current year, our transportation line is 859,000, and then next year with contractual obligations, it'll go to 1,058,000 of the whole $55 million budget.
Right, and the reason why I asked that question, and stop me if I'm off key here, you have an article coming up for the South School locks. And what happens is, back in the time of special town meeting, you had forgone any money going towards that because the school was going to be torn down at some point. And I can appreciate that, but by the same token, the locks are very critical, very important.
It's not on the budget.
Excuse me, that's not really on the budget. I just want
Right,
to
well, that's
clarify.
why-
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the article for the South School. That's not the security one. There's a separate security one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the agenda you have the South School, but that's not part of the budget. And then there's the intrusion alarm upgrade, which is a different article.
Well, that's where it wasn't very, as a previous speaker mentioned, there's a lot of details that we didn't have in
Right,
the handout.
but we're not at that part of the agenda yet either. So I just wanted to clarify, just so everyone's aware of where we are.
Right, and that's why I asked if I speak off turn here.
Yeah. I wanted to mention these are two different articles that you're talking about, though.
Okay, so basically the busing was $800 and something thousand for the year.
That's our total budget for the year.
Okay, thank you. By
Thank
the
you very
way,
much.
just one quick thing. This room is extremely hot. It's very tight. And there's a lot of hot air floating around.
Yeah. I sent out an email to the committee to warn them, too. Any other questions or comments from the public on the budget? Next item, we're going to go to the Southeastern Regional High School budget. And from what I understand from Mr. Rowe, the numbers are not in yet on this. Perhaps someone from the Southeastern Regional High School Committee would like to speak on this?
Okay. As of today, I got new numbers. They're still not finalized. We have not had our school committee meeting where we've looked at the budget yet, so that whatever information I'm giving to you is not official. I got a figure today of Stoughton's allocation for Southeastern as being $1,533,296. That's, as I
Preliminary?
say, it's subject to the fact that we have not even voted on it yet.
Could you repeat that number, please?
1,533,296. I think it's, well, let me explain. Stoughton last year had 111 students. This year, we're up to 125. So the majority of that increase is the enrollment difference.
Excuse me, I don't think I'm clear. You said there was 11 new?
No, we had 111 students.
Yeah.
And last year's allocation was based on, last year's assessment was based on 111 students. We now have 125 students from Stoughton. So that additional 10%,
14
more than 10%, yeah, 14
through you, Vaughn, it's
students
14.
has
Okay.
raised the assessment.
14, thank you.
And Southeastern cannot lower their, whatever number we do get from the state, which this number will probably cannot be lowered because we're at net school spending. And we've been at net school spending for years. And we have to do that because of Brockton. Because Brockton could not afford to give us any more money. So, and the majority of our kids are from Brockton. So.
So we pay.
Okay, any discussion on the Southeastern School budget, regional high school budget?
I want to have Robin identify herself.
Oh, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Robin,
I'm
would you like to
Robin
identify
Zoll.
yourself?
I'm
Thank you, Joel.
sorry, 167 Cross Street. I'm a town meeting precinct rep from Precinct 7, and I am the representative from Stoughton to Southeastern Regional School Committee.
Well, thank you for attending the meeting.
Okay.
I do have a question.
John, you have a question?
Yes. Ms. Zoll, do you have any idea, Robin, when we might hear?
Our first since we did not have numbers at our last school committee. Since we didn't have numbers at our last school committee meeting, we were supposed to have a meeting this week, and we didn't have numbers, so we couldn't discuss it. We're having a meeting on the 14th, and that's going to be our budget hearing. I don't know, if we'll vote the budget then or vote it probably on the 28th of March.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because we can't do anything until the budget's
No,
comes
I
out from the
understand
governor.
that. I mean, that the 28th is getting to be our cutoff for when we're going
Yeah.
to be able to do anything, because we got to process the books, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Whatever.
that happened last year, Joel.
We'll
Yep.
have to go with what we have, but you're going to be meeting on the 14th anyway?
We're going to be meeting on the 14th,
Okay.
but it's going to be the first time the school committee even sees the budget, so.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, well,
Okay.
the sooner the better, as they say.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Southeastern Regional High School budget? Questions or comments from the? Oh, Elliot.
Elliot.
Thank you. Stereo. There used to be a formula that was kept very secretive, that how much each town would pay per student based on lots of nebulous data. Is that information available to us. And for instance, like we said we got a 50% poverty level here in Stoughton. I'm one of them.
Okay.
But what about Brockton? What
We
is
have-
their...
Okay. Our per pupil expense for every student is the same. The difference is that is the Chapter 70 money. Because Brockton has extreme poverty, they get a tremendous amount of Chapter 70 money. If you look at some of the numbers for the other towns, they're paying much more, they're not getting as much. Like the town of Sharon does not get much money on Chapter 70 towards the per pupil. So they're paying it comes to a much higher amount per pupil cost for them than it is for Stoughton.
Okay, thank you.
It's based on the community's wealth, ability to pay.
Any other questions or comments from the committee on this Southeastern Regional High School budget? Questions or comments from the public on the Southeastern Regional High School budget? Yes, Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Excuse me for not standing. I'm starting to fade. Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, a proud graduate of Stoughton High School. But there's an increasing value to vocational education. If you've been reading the paper, in fact, the state is really pushing to expand the number of seats available because more and more people are realizing the value of a vocational or technical education versus an education that's basically aimed at turning out people that are qualified to go to college. Although if you go to Southeastern, you can still go to college. And I think it's very important for a segment of our population that this continue to be an option for their boys and girls.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Any other questions or comments from the public on Southeastern Regional High School budget? You have a question, Diane?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Robin. I think I see Robin back there. Hi, Robin. How many students are there currently at Southeastern, and what percentage does Stoughton get to send?
First of all, I'll give you the second minute. I'll give it to you in a second. The number, it's over 1,600 now. We've actually expanded. We've tried to find every single inch of space we can possibly find to put students, and we're putting on a new STEM wing, which will hopefully allow us to get a few more students in, but we're very limited on space because we're on wetlands. We border the Hockomock Swamp, so we have to build in front of the building and in crevices to add anything to the building. But the number is 1,637 students.
Okay, and how many students from Stoughton this year in grade 9 are you going to accept?
Okay, we have a blind admissions process, which means we are, just in the process of accepting students. I don't think the letters have gone out yet. Whoever qualifies. I mean, what we do is we have a point system, and we have a cutoff, and, we basically, everybody above a certain point will get in. We've had to change our admission processes because of some of the lawsuits, et cetera, that have been filed about vocational admissions. We've had to de-emphasize certain things and emphasize other things, but it's a blind process. So we don't have, unlike other voc techs, we don't have quotas.
Okay, just one last statement. I would assume, though, that the majority of students that go there come from Brockton, correct?
Absolutely. Over 1,000 right now are from Brockton. I mean, there's only 20 students from Sharon. I mean, it is, but we don't have a minimum or maximum number from any community.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee, Southeastern Regional High School? Any other questions or comments from the public, Southeastern Regional High School? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item agenda, agenda item Norfolk County Agricultural High School. We received the numbers on that today from Mr. Rowe. I guess the tuition is $4,312 each person. At this point in time, grade 9, there's 1. Grade 10, there are 2. Grade 11, there are 2. Grade 12, there are 2. According to the letter, there are 7 students who have applied for admission for the 23-24 school year. So something, to keep in mind that if everybody moves up one grade, that instead of having the 7 students, it's potential to have 12 there, assuming that all 7 were accepted and all the others move on to the next grade. Just something to keep in mind. That email went out kind of late today, so if you haven't seen it yet, take a look at your email. Anybody wants a copy of it, I have it here too. Yeah, Mr. Rose said it was $184 over what the budget was, because they had budgeted for $30,000, but if you do the math, it's $30,184, but that's based on current enrollment. We do the math out for the potential next year enrollment, assuming 7 students were to be accepted, and everyone moved up a grade, that'd be 12 students. That would be $51,744, meaning that the budget's actually shorted in there, so something to keep in mind. Any questions or comments on the Norfolk County Agricultural High School budget? Dave?
Yeah, through you, Vaughn, what is the source for the short? Like, if it comes up short, where do you get the money?
I guess we'd have to move some numbers around like we did last year.
So we're going to bring that up later when we have Bill with us? We'll bring it up at another, are we going to keep this open? Is this going to be an open situation, or are we going to deal with it when it's closed?
I
got it, but when do we talk about the source if Bill's not here? Do you want to continue
Well, we wouldn't talk
it,
about
or-
the source now anyway. I mean,
Well, okay.
That will be during the deliberations. We'll figure.
When it's closed, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it and make a decision at that point. It won't be during an open year.
well, we might get more numbers by that point too.
Right, okay.
I mean, this is preliminary. We just got this email today. So I'm
Understood.
just
No, I just
kinda
wanted
throwing
to
it out there.
I just want to know what we're going to do. Okay.
It's a good question though, because if for 20,000, the same thing happened last year. We got the numbers, the potential students. We put that money in. Maybe they didn't all go because I guess only one of them went from grade 9. So, but we have to be prepared for that anyway. They might not go, but if they all do go, we want to make sure that it's funded. Yeah, 51,744. Subtract that out. So, any other questions, comments from the committee on the Norfolk County Agricultural High School? Questions or comments from the public? Norfolk County Agricultural High School. Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. The young man who manages my farm is a graduate of this school. I realize very few students now are going there, and it isn't just for farming. The sad truth is there's a lot less agriculture than there used to be. But they also train kids young people, to work with vets and to work with flowers. And I know the young man that manages my farm also worked with small engine repair. So it's a niche market, but it should be available to those students who don't fit in any other niches.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Any other questions or comments from the public? Peter, please identify yourself for the record.
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. Question I have is, you said the dollar amount per student going to this school in Southeast Regional. Does that also include their transportation in that figure?
Okay. With any regional school, I think Norfolk Aggie might be a little different, but we get we're supposed to be reimbursed 100% for transportation because we have to transport all of our students. But we usually get 70 to 80%. The proposed budget, I believe this year we're getting 90%. That's what the initial figures by the governor has said. And we're very hopeful we get it, but we basically, when we budget based on the year before's transportation numbers, assuming we're not going to get the full reimbursement.
Well, thank you very much for that information, Robin.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from the public on Norfolk County Agricultural High School budget? Hearing none. We will go to the next item on the agenda, Article 68, security upgrades, intrusion alarm upgrades, and interior door hardware. Would you like to present this, Dr. Rabb?
So, like Mrs. Brophy said at the beginning, and I'll just address this now, we have gone out to Senator Timothy's office, and we've asked him for support in the FY. We've asked Senator Timothy for support in the FY24 state budget for this article, as it's a security article. But I will go through it because we do have it on the list. So we're looking for this $450,000 in two parts. The first part is intrusion alarm upgrades. And so one of the things we found is that we need increased and additional security sensors at O'Donnell, Daw, and Gibbons, and a few at the other schools as well. These security sensors are the individual detection devices throughout all our buildings, and they include motion sensors, entry point contacts, and other devices that detect leaks in boiler rooms and temperature sensors for critical environments. The important part of this article is that we need to upgrade the panels to increase our user capacity at the three larger schools, O'Donnell, Daw, and Gibbons, and we need to add some of these sensors at key locations. Additional security sensors will be installed at all schools except Stoughton High School. Stoughton High School is already state-of-the-art, and for all of our security, we typically use Stoughton High School as the benchmark, and we want to bring the other schools there. And I will say, when it comes to security in general, we don't exempt the South. There might be other things that we exempt the South from, but we don't exempt the South from security. We know that they need to stay secure for every moment that they're open. And should that, change 4 or 5 years from now, then we'll deal with that. There's a lot of things that we can salvage security-wise from the South when that happens 4 or 5 years from now, but we don't exempt the South from that. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you. The other piece of this is the interior door hardware. Again, what we found over time, and we've had lockdown drills now that we've come out of COVID, we've had 2 or 3 lockdown drills in each of the buildings. And as a result of those, we found that one of the things that makes it tough is when we have a lockdown drill, if you've been in one, teachers have to close the door, and they have to make sure that the door is locked on the outside so nobody can get in. When we have a building with several different types of lock sets, that can cause some confusion. And so what this article would do, it would allow us to have the same set of lock sets similar to the high school in all of our buildings. And so the cost of a new lock core is approximately $450 per set, and we have 515 interior hardware sets. So that $250,000 for that, for a total of $450,000 for this article in security.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the committee? Chet, do you have a question?
I have a question. Chapter 7, last year we had $4 million that we put for different projects, capital projects. Can we use that $450,000 from Chapter 7 money to do the locks and things like that at the school? Or is that already allocated for different things at school? Just a question.
Sure. It's certainly allowable. It's certainly allowable to use Chapter 70 funding for this. The article wasn't designed for that. The article was designed as a borrowing of free cash article. Like I said, one of the things we did was go out to Senator Timothy's office and let him know about these so that he can advocate for it as well.
So it's similar to the walkie-talkies when we did those about 2 years ago at town meeting. Feel like I'm sorry, I'm like yelling. So when we went to town meeting, we brought the okay, hold on. What? So we brought the article forward. We let everyone know that we had gone to, local state legislature and asked if, they could put that in the budget, if that would be considered. And if we received those funds back, we would hand it back to the town. In fact, we did 2 years ago. I believe the money went towards something for Cedar Hill. So like we did, we would do the same here in that case. I think keeping that in mind and that consideration, that's why I wanted to talk about, when we start to talk about the Chapter 70, even however that works out and he's not able to fully fund that, if that money's sitting in stabilization or whatever the account is on there, that money will be available to pay for that as well. Does that make sense? Yes. Awesome.
You good, Chet? Okay. Any other questions from the committee? John, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Not yelling, just projecting, as they say. Through you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Rabb, could you just, for those like myself that we went through the special and we did a lot of things for security at the school, can you just, explain how this is different than what we just did in the special, just to avoid any confusion down the line?
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
the two articles at the special town meeting, one of them was for the vestibules at the Daw and the Gibbons. And so that's a very different thing. That's adding that second entrance and making sure that there's dual entrance at both of those schools, so that can come up to the security standards that we have at the high school and what we expect to see. So those funds are earmarked for that. The other article was about cameras, and cameras both internal and external. So again, all security related, but for different things. So those were camera articles that we need to upgrade the cameras in the elementary schools, and so that's what those are for.
I appreciate it. I
Sure.
think it's good for the people here, because they may just know you did security before, and all of a sudden here we go again. So I think it was just worth it to get it out there on what the differences were. So, because people aren't going to go back and look. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on Article 68? Dave?
Chet asked my question.
Chet, you stole
Chet
Dave's
asked-
question?
He stole my question.
Chet.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chet.
Chet. Thank you.
I'm here for you, Dave.
Eric, you have any questions? Laura? No? Mark? Elliot, you have a question, right? Thank you.
A quick one. These numbers, was those from quotes or just a ballpark number?
I'm going to defer to Mrs. Husseini on that one.
Speaking of the lock sets, the door handle, door hardware, that is a quote per, this is a procurement only item on this article, where the installation will be actually done by my maintenance staff. So that is a direct quote from the manufacturer on a per lock set and a per door closer. And I'm looking at doing all of the classroom doors and the hall-facing doors first, prioritizing them, and just kind of picking our way through, doing storefront locks, which are the really secure ones, lock automatically for all classrooms. The classroom, or actually not the classroom, a different type of lock set with a push button for the offices, where they have the ability in a smaller space to react and to close a door that normally would have to be open for people to come in and out to do business in that office space. And we will hit all of the classroom doors and most of the office doors, and as much as we can with the money that's allocated with my staff.
I was more interested in like the security, the sensors and all that
The
stuff.
intrusion alarm, so I've got a company that is an estimate, not a direct quote, because they still need to come and take a look at our equipment. It is a one-for-one swap, though. The wiring is in place and will not need to be replaced, so it's really just mostly an equipment panel installation, and most of the new contacts will be wireless, so they won't involve a lot of electrical work.
Thank you.
You have another question, John?
Just a follow-up. If you have any backup information for this article, could you please get it to us electronically so we can make sure it gets in the book?
Can do.
Thank you. Because we are responsible for the book this year. We want to make sure we get everything in it that we can.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 68, security upgrades, intrusion alarm upgrades, and interior door hardware. Any questions or comments from the public? Article 68, security upgrades, intrusion alarm upgrades, and interior door hardware.
My question was answered.
Peter, please identify yourself for the record.
Peter Ventresco, town meeting rep. My question is the outside doors, because one of those last schools we had all that shooting in, the doors didn't lock automatically. So everybody went in, the staff and everything else, they had to lock the door. So apparently somebody went in, they didn't lock the door, so that's how the shooting it in. These doors are going to automatically close by themselves, outside doors.
Go ahead. I can answer.
I can speak to that. Our outside doors, our exterior doors, do lock automatically. They are, however, doors that can be caught by the wind and other things. We have put signs on doors. We've reminded people. It has become practice. There's nothing worse than hearing the news of a school shooting, but it does reinforce for people what their habits have to be. So if the wind grabs a door because of the exposure, we make sure that the teachers who use that door know that they have to double check it and pull it behind them. But yes, our doors do automatically lock.
Well, could they put a stronger
We've
cylinders on there that the wind ain't going to rip it off? Or?
We have absolutely done that and adjust them constantly where that can happen. But there are one or two key places, won't get into where they are, that because of the siting of the building, things
Okay.
happen, or pebbles get stuck in a door or things, but we're constantly vigilant. My custodians do a daily walk around after the kids are in school to make sure that all doors are secured.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 68, security upgrades, intrusion alarm upgrades, and interior door hardware. Hearing none, we will move to the next item on the agenda, but before that, we will take a 5-minute recess for a quick break. Dr. Ab.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm joined today by Mr. Mark Zemanian and Mr. Barry Kassler, Mrs. Christine Feeney, the principal of the Hanson, as well as Sam Lafarge, the student representative to the school committee. And we're real excited to present, we're real excited to present this article. And so we'll do it in a couple of different phases. What I'd like to do is explain a little bit about why we're here and what is going on with the current playground and why it needs to be replaced. Review a little bit of the budget and how we put the budget together. Just today, walking in, I was handed a sheaf of letters from students at the Hanson in support of this article, so I'll read a couple of excerpts. I promise I won't read every one of them, but some of them are absolutely adorable. So I'll read a few of those, and we'll have those available. And then we'll hear from Mr. Zemanian about the logistics in terms of the CPC. So that's how the next, hopefully, 5 or 10 minutes will go. So to begin with, if you've been by the Hanson recently, you know that the existing playground is 22 years old. The average life of a playground is 15 to 20 years, so it has already exceeded the useful life of a playground. It's 9,500 square feet, and currently there's a swing set and 3 play structures with various climbing, balance slides, and bridge elements that are there. And in your packets, there are pictures of the current condition, so you can take a look at the current condition. In addition to its use as a K-5 playground with the 275-student school, it is also used extensively by our after-school program every day, and people from the neighborhood and families with children on the weekend, if they play in the adjacent fields, they'll often use that playground as well. The Hanson playground, as I mentioned, is past its useful life. It's showing signs of deterioration. The coated metal decking and support railings are starting to delaminate and expose sharp edges. This allows water to come into contact with the steel and advances rusting. We've seen that if you've been by it. In addition to replacing the play structures, the shallow roots of the pine trees within the playground do create a safety hazard, and runoff from that hill causes problems with standing water on the playground, and drainage improvements are needed as well. The other issue, aside from the fact that it's delaminating and there are sharp edges, is the current Hanson playground doesn't include structures that are considered accessible, nor does the surfacing meet accessibility standards. The surface is just a regular surface. It doesn't have the hard rubber surface that you could roll a wheelchair or a stroller easily over. The goal of our new playground is to include structures that meet the needs of all children in our community, and the new playground would be designed with inclusive equipment and accessible surfacing. So how do we put the budget together? The total article is $950,000. $350,000 of that is playground structures and the design work, and that is going to be, we had a lot of conversations about procurement. We want to make sure that all the procurement is done properly, and so for the playground structure and design, that would be through a contract, through the Massachusetts Higher Education Consortium. We'd go out to bid on the actual installation of the playground and the poured rubber surfaces. We would use our own house doctor here for $50,000 for the design, and then we'd go out to bid on any construction and site work. Because in addition to replacing the playground itself, we know that there are drainage issues on the site, and so to make the new playground work well, we're going to have to make sure that we provide that drainage. So in a nutshell, that's why we're here, and that's where we broke down the $950,000. I would like to read a couple of statements from some students at the Hanson. I promise I won't read this whole book, but it's adorable. We work so hard all day in class and really would appreciate a better playground to use at recess. The more energy we get out, the better we can focus and learn. Please help us improve our school. Sincerely, third graders Ava, Michael, and Enelson. The Hanson School needs a new playground. Ours is not safe, and they're made out of metal. Sometimes kids cut themselves on it. Can we please have wooden stairs? I don't know that we're going to do wooden stairs, but and we get stuck in the swirly stairs. So really exciting stuff. And then this one very here, the Hanson School needs a new playground because our playground isn't safe. It's too small. We need a bigger one with more space. It has metal. We want a vending machine that has water, and we can't wait for our new playground. They snuck that in there. That was interesting. I like that, yeah.
I don't remember agreeing to a vending
No, there was no
machine.
vending machine. The second grader thought that was going to...
No, we are not asking for it.
No. The Hanson School needs a new playground. We need slides because everyone is crashing when they're going down the slide. We need more space because when people run, they hit one another. We need more swings because they're squeaky. So we want to make sure we don't have squeaky swings. So these are adorable, and this is how excited the students are at the Hanson for this. I would like to give Sam Lafarge, our student representative, she's a senior at Stoughton High School, and she was the one that brought forward this ask to the school committee and really started the ball rolling, along with her colleagues, Raina Tratt and Morgan Groby. And so Sam is here to speak on behalf of the article, and I would like to give her a few minutes to address the committee.
Hello, everyone. I did go to the Hanson School, and I kind of can resonate with some of the things that the third graders and second graders had said, because I remember kids getting hurt on the play structures, and that was probably 8 years ago, and it's likely only gotten worse from that time. And when we did our walkthrough, there was a lot of rust and things that you could see that kids could get hurt on, and I think it's such an amazing opportunity to get to give these kids a new play structure. I think they're all very deserving, and this is not only a elementary school space, it's a recreational area that kids from anywhere could be using, and an after-school activity space that is used. I think it's an amazing thing that we are doing, and yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
Awesome, Sam. I'm going to take it from here, and then I'm going to introduce folks from the CPC. About 2 years ago, the chair of the CPC reached out and said, how can we partner with the kids in the schools? How can we partner with the students? How can we help? And so we sat and thought, and the school committee, we have a student advisory council, and there are 5 members. 5, Sam? Or is it 6? Yeah, it's 5. Yeah, 5 is an extra one. So we have 5 members, and we talked to them and we said, what do you guys think? Think outside the box. What do you guys think? They're all high school students. And we said, and it's not just about high school. What do you think the Stoughton Public Schools can use? What can the students use? What's a big thing that we think, safety-wise, curriculum-wise, anything? And they came up with this project. So high school students thought about this Hanson School project, which to me was such a big deal. And then they brought forward all these concerns. They even talked about the blacktop. There was discussion about that at one point. And Morgan, my daughter, is part of that group. And we went to the Hanson. And Katie, you were there. And we walked around and looked at all the ideas, and everything was safety, safety, safety. There's parts of trees that what are those called? The roots. Thank you. All right. The roots that grow out of the ground, and kids fall over them and they get hurt, and it's just in really bad shape. So Barry and Mark, I want to thank you both for being there and going to that, and for being a support model for the young students and having the conversations with them that you had in the parking lot and saying, this is great, being involved in your community. These are the things that we want Stoughton students to continue to do even after you go to college. So I want to thank you guys, and I want to hand it to you, Mark, but it's worth mentioning that they had come to us and wanted to figure out what's a good way to partner with the students, and this is the best way I could imagine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did meet with the students about 2 years ago, as Sandra said. We were looking for an opportunity to get the students involved. The Community Preservation Committee is here to benefit the entire town, all the residents. And we felt, you know, these young men and women are coming up, in this case women, are coming up through the ranks and they're getting ready to vote. And why not expose them to a piece of their government and how local government works? So we thought this was a neat idea. I worked with both the chair and vice chair, Sandra and Katie, on coming up with an idea that the students could participate in. And this is a product of that. We talked about a great many things. We talked about ADA accessibility, which is going to be a part of this, being sensitive to children with various needs. So it's a completely inclusive design, not, you know, separating children with certain disabilities out. So a lot of thought was really put into this by the Student Advisory Committee, the CPC, and the Superintendent and School Committee, and I want to thank them all for their work on this. So when this application came to us, it did include blacktop originally. We were unable to fund that because it's used for multiple uses, so that was removed from it. We looked at the entire playground area, the drainage needs of the playground, possibly expanding the size of the playground. We also took a look at the trees. There, as Sandra mentioned, there's some beautiful trees there. Provides a lot of shade, but also creates tripping hazards. So we requested that some thought be given to sort of reestablishing new trees or changing the grade level so those could stay. And I know they're going to be in the process of working on that. That was something I was happy about. It's nice to have a little shade when you're at a playground, especially in the summer. So this met the CPA requirements on a state level as far as monies that can be expended from the Community Preservation Act for this project. Ultimately, the CPC voted to recommend $950,000 in cash for this project. That includes design and construction. And I think that's it. Was there anything else that we needed to touch, Barry?
Just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is, as Dr. Robb and as Sam Lafarge said, it is one of the things that impressed the committee was that this is something that is used not just by the Hanson School, but by the entire town.
Yeah.
So that was important to us because that's one of our focuses, to make, if possible, to include things that will help the entire town. And the other thing is we did follow through on just making sure that what we were approving was allowable under the CPA, under the Community Preservation Act, which, for example, the drainage that was mentioned where you have mulch that's kind of flowing off the surface into another surface. The drainage can be addressed because that is something that makes the project usable. So even though it's not recreation in and of itself, it is a necessary adjunct and a necessary part of it. So we did look at that, and we were really happy to work with the people who came forward, the administration
and administration,
the school committee, and especially the student advisory committee, and we're really encouraged. And
it was a lot of fun, if I may just wrap up from the CPC's end, to work with the students in an appropriate fashion where it gave them an opportunity to give some real insight as to what they needed. And Barry's right. When we looked at this, the intent of the CPC is to benefit the community as a whole. So that was a factor we had to look at. Is this just used during school time, or is it used beyond that? I have made innumerous stops at that area because my office used to be at that school, and I'd stop at unusual times. This playground is used by the community as a whole. Some people drive there, some people walk there. So I felt very comfortable saying there's a community benefit as a whole for this project. I'm ready to answer any questions. I don't know if you want to wrap it up, Doctor?
Well, I'd like to give Christine Feeney, the principal of the Hanson, an opportunity to say a few words.
Hi, I'm Christine Feeney. I'm the principal of the Hanson School, and I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in this, especially the high school students, because they have impressed me beyond. I was sitting out there with Sam and the patience she has at the young age of 17 or 18, and just the whole team of girls. Your daughter, they came in and they were when they came for their first tour with all of us, they were very, very focused. They had their areas they wanted improved. And it was a dream of ours, but it honestly wouldn't have come true without that being your goal. And Stoughton Extended Day also uses that space. So I know your daughter went to Stoughton Extended Day, you went to the Hansons, and the kids, their favorite time of day. And honestly, we would so appreciate if you considered this and grant us this. But the kids are so happy just playing. They love it, love it. But it is getting slightly dangerous at this point. So it would be great. But if you read any of the notes, they're so funny because they'll even say, like, if you can't, it's okay. We still like to play kind of thing. And it's, they're so joyful. The Hawks at the Hanson, if anyone would like to come visit and say hello, we'd love to have you. But they really are grateful. They're great kids. They deserve this. And hopefully, fingers crossed, and I hope you do get to read the letters because some of them are, and there are actually probably 150 more letters. I could not give them all to you. There are so many. There were a few that had to be pulled back, but they are great. They're great. But I want to thank everyone because everyone sitting all around here was so helpful, and it wouldn't have happened without them. So I do very much appreciate it.
You want to, you can get them, we can get the letters all scanned, and Dr. Rabb, if your office wants to send it to the members of the financial committee.
Yeah, if you actually,
Put them in the warrant book?
if you want to select a handful, seriously, if you want to select a handful, absolutely, get them to us, and we'll include that in the book.
Okay.
We might not put in 200, but, you pick out 5 or 10.
Let me send you 150 then.
No, you have to pick them.
I'll pick them. Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Chairman Zamanian, Dr. Rabb, and thank you, Sam, too, for speaking on this. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Chet, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mark and Dr. West. I just have to say, my granddaughter from Texas came and played at the Hanson School in the playground. And she goes, "What is this, Grandpa? Is it a dump?" Okay, she comes from Texas, and called my playground dump. But anyways, I'm for this, really, really, really for this. My question is, what are we going to do with the pole in the back for sledding, things like that? Are we going to?
I'm sorry, TV audience didn't hear any of that. Should I start over? No, don't mention Texas. What are we doing anything with the hill for the sledding?
No, not at this time. That was not a part of the scope.
Okay, so that's still going to be at the risk of people that want to sled down the hill.
Which many do, yes.
I know.
We have snow.
I know. Well, okay. Thank you.
Thank
Just a question. That's all.
Eric, you have a question?
I do. Hi, thanks y'all for being here. I don't have a granddaughter who insults our playgrounds. And I just have cats and they don't care. So, pardon if it's a dumb question. And don't tell me there are no dumb questions. I know we say that as teachers, but let's be real. The only concern I had looking at this is just you use the term premature for the drainage design fee. So I'm just concerned about the prudence of attaching that into this project, saying that we can't have a firm design or construction estimate until the final playground layout. Is it possible at all to just separate it out and so that can be a subsequent project so that we can actually have a firm plan and estimate for the drainage portion of it, rather than kind of hoping that it falls within the conservative estimate that the CPC has kind of wrapped into all of this?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. It's an excellent question, actually, and it's something that we've looked at before. The CPC funded the Wilkins Playground 3-4 years ago now. And during that time, we also knew there was clearly a drainage issue. We did not know the extent of the drainage issue, so what we chose to do from a CPA point of view is allocate enough money to handle what we would consider a worst-case scenario. What happens with CPA funds is once the job is done and the engineers look at this, they'll say, hey, you allocated, we'll say $100,000 just for the sake of discussion. We realized we only needed $50,000. So the additional $50,000 won't be used for anything else. It's not going to be used to build up a better piece of or extend the playground per se. That money simply comes back to us. We choose to do this on a CPA level this way because we don't want to drag a project out for multiple years. So better to include a larger number to include the entire packet than have to come back to us next year for another piece, because specials are only meant to happen on special occasions. They're not a fall town meeting is what I'm getting at. So I wouldn't want the schools to have to wait an entire annual cycle to get that additional funding. So that's why we chose to fund it that way. And the money comes back to us. It's only encumbered for a period of time.
You good? Any other questions from the committee? Article 35. John, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pardon me, through you. Is this project going to be within the footprint of the existing playground?
Yes, that's the expectation.
All right. Well, I didn't know, those are some nice trees. I mean, those are mature
They're cool trees.
And rather than losing them, I mean, even if you had to push the fences out a little and keep the trees, you could keep your shade, maybe throw a bench or two there for the older people to sit. But that's why I was wondering if it was intended to be within the same footprint, or if they could
Yeah, there's no
adjust.
other, through you, Mr. Chair, there's no other shade near this playground. This is really the only form of shade that is available to it. And I agree with you, I didn't want to see those trees go, so I'm trusting the engineers will work out the issues with the root system and come up with a plan. If we can save those, it'd be wonderful.
Well, otherwise
If
you're
not,
going
I
to go through
want-
the tree warden, right?
Yeah, I want some sort of mature tree that will provide instantaneous shade for.
You're not going to replace those,
No, you're not.
so but I appreciate the response. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, I'm
Please.
sorry, could we make benches out of the roots?
But you're still tripping on them, so why not just leave the trees?
Well, you'll fall and sit down.
I do appreciate actually the suggestion. The thought is to keep this to 9,500 square feet. Could it shift so that the trees could be saved? Quite possibly. There's enough flat land around it. That actually might solve some of the drainage issues, because according to the initial survey by the playground designer, he sees what he's commonly seen, which is a great deal of 20 years of compaction of 14 inches of mulch added every year has created as much of the ponding and drainage problem, more so than probably the soil once it's ripped up. I like the idea of shifting it. You cannot cover those roots. They're pines. They seek air. So they will just continue to rise. But most of the playground structures now the key structures have some sort of element of shade, a hard canopy or something of that sort, to at least provide partial shade to the equipment. Not necessarily for the people sitting on the benches, but we're going to do all we can to provide a shady situation.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, because those are quite mature.
They are.
And I know in the application there were some nice pictures. I'm looking at the GPS. It's a pretty
They're
robust little forest there. And I am sure they absorb quite a bit of water.
They do.
And if you remove them, it's just going to have that much more water available. And that's why I was just curious. If
Very
you
good
can
point.
try and work around them, I think it would be very nice. I'm fully in support of this, as when they did the other playground at the Gibbons, with, having it as with the accessible and all that. I believe at that time, one of the members, Mr. Chet over there, said, I'd like to see this done at every single playground. And I'm fully in favor of these and using the money to do that, because there's no doubt these school playgrounds get used more than during school hours, so. I appreciate Sam, Mark, Dr. Rab, Barry, and Joyce. I appreciate the presentation. I'm glad it was moved forward, and I hope we can convince town meeting to do the same. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Joel has a question, and Mark has a question. Joel?
Mark, on the funding, can I assume that the CPC has made, I shouldn't assume anything, has the CPC looked at the funding and made a determination as to whether or not this is going to be a cash item or a bond item?
Yes, we did. I had mentioned earlier, perhaps it was missed, this will be a cash article.
This will be a cash.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Now, you have several other
Yes,
articles coming up that have nothing to do with the schools.
correct.
Are they all going to be cash articles?
All cash.
Yes, they are.
Every single penny this year is cash. Well, you know, and I don't want to get off subject, okay? This is something we should talk about tomorrow, but as long as the CPC has the funding available, and it is something that should be paid for in cash. There are good reasons to bond things, and there are good reasons to pay cash.
You and I have had discussions
We have.
about the difference between the two. And I
I'm a
know
huge
members
fan of cash.
the committee feel that if you have the cash, you should pay for it with the cash.
And looking at what we have ample cash left over after we pay for all these articles, presuming they all go through this year.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
You said Mark, but
Next.
can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Before it goes down that end? I have a grandson who goes, I had two grandsons, now one's at the middle school, who went to the Hanson School. They love the Hanson School, and very excited to find out that it's going to have a new playground. Me too.
Mark, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Through you, I'm not sure who would be able to answer this, but I was wondering how the Wilkins School, the playground behind it, is actually going, since it was redesigned recently with the drainage and the poor surface, because this will be our second one with that surface. How is it going with the schools? Do the teachers like it? And the kids at home?
So I'm going to turn this over to Joyce, but I will say from a CPC perspective, we follow up on the projects that we recommend that get passed. I've been out to this site numerous times, to the Wilkins, and so far so good. The surface is holding up well. There were some very minor issues with some of the equipment that I brought to the attention of Matt Cachone, or was it Paul? Or both? Yeah, Matt, and those were addressed by the company immediately. I've been very pleased with not only the surface, but the drainage system, and I'll let Joyce talk about the students in the
I actually can't say that I pay a whole lot of attention to the playground structures because I'm so impressed with the drainage, and that's really my concern. It was an awful situation prior to the playground. Both the playground, the surfacing for the playground, and then the DPW coming along and adding a strip of porous pavement when they wanted to move the fence or relocate it slightly, has solved really every drainage problem. That was about 2 years ago that they added the porous pavement strip for us. So we've not noted any backup of icing onto the Wilkins hardtop where it had been collecting. The surface, I know that my custodian inspects it regularly because it is where the kids go out to play, notifies the town if there is any loose bolts or anything that pops up. The surface appears to be holding up really well. There are certainly places, because it is open to a lot of adults as well who are observing softball games, who sometimes put chairs and other items on it that they shouldn't, where there have been some divots, but that they've either been repaired or that they're minor.
Yeah, 'cause that was one of my concerns too.
Yeah.
This field is going to be next to a football field and
Mhm.
a baseball field again. How
Yeah.
is the surface holding up with the cleats and the chairs and stuff on it?
Yeah.
I believe that, the fence and repair the fence around the whole entire.
And there will be at the new, yes. Yeah, yes, there'll be a new fence around the perimeter.
Then my next question is on the design stage, are the kids and the teachers going to be involved with the design of this?
So yes, I've contacted the playground manufacturer. Other than coming out and doing his initial site visit, he hasn't started working with us yet on the design. But they have a program. They specialize in school playgrounds. I do not recall the name of the school on Squantum Street in Quincy, but I drove by it. It was jaw-droppingly beautiful. My family wouldn't stop and let me play. But it had all of the structures that I've been looking at in the landscape structure catalog. So what they do is they come out with a catalog and a set of typical, for the size of school, for the age of kids who play on the playground, and they have the kids kind of design their dream playground with that. We help narrow it down. It's funny, one of the things that the principal tells me is that we need more swings, but when the playground design is all said and done, I think you'll find probably very few swings because the structures are so imaginative, and that it'll be it'll just like schools are new age schools, it'll be a new age playground.
And then, how much of this playground structure are you planning to have to be inclusive? Of course, all of it can't be into some of the play elements.
Sure.
What's your percentage that you're going for?
I wouldn't speculate on a percentage. I would say as much as we can possibly do to make it as accessible to as many students as we can.
And I encourage anybody just to look up landscape structures online and look at their catalog of structures, because so much of it is not just wheelchair inclusive, but there's inclusive structures for kids who have sensory issues. It meets a lot of needs, so it's a broad topic when you say something's inclusive. But to the most part, it is a company with the most accessible for kids with physical disabilities in terms of being able to go on structures without having to be transported, lifted into a structure, as opposed to a lot of other playgrounds manufacturers that make separate, supposedly, but not quite equal structures.
And if I could follow up, Mr. Chair, so the CPC had a little bit of an advantage on this inclusivity aspect of it. My daughter is a teacher of children with severe special needs. So basically when this came to me, I went to her and says, hey, what's your dream? You know, what would you want on a playground? And she gave me a list, which both the student council and administration took to heart, and I'm going to be following this through and ensuring that as much of that as possible can be put in there. I think it's a great thing. We have a good number of children with special needs here in Stoughton, and they need to be paid attention to. So,
That was my thought on this
Yeah.
playground here. It's very visible from the main road. It's very well seen, and we have a playground situated from a parking lot. It's not that far.
Yeah.
So making it
Yeah.
inclusive is going to be fairly easy once it's designed. So I think it would actually pull in people from other communities to see how our town
It will.
absolutely.
Just one of the main questions on that. My final question is start date and finish date?
No, no, not until we start the design process and get a feel for the equipment, and then clearly the lead times, which are getting better on everything, but there are still lead times that we have to consider. So I would be guessing, totally speculating, to give you a start time. We would like to have the design done really by the end of May.
You good, Mark?
Oh, I got it.
Okay, Laura, you have any questions? No. Adam? Bob? Elliot? Dave, you have a question?
You got your pen ready, Dolores? All right.
You need a new one?
Thank you. Thank you very much for presenting. Through you, Vaughn. I guess I'll start with just some context. A lot's been talked about, like with the shade and the roots and the, how decrepit it was and how the useful life being passed. I actually was one of 25 or 30 parents that actually installed the playground that we're talking about. So all three of my kids, they came through Hanson Hawks. They were all Hanson Hawks. They loved it there. I actually have a child who actually fell down, but not by tripping on a root. She ran the wrong direction, and she got a shiner from it. But it was just, that was probably 12, 15 years ago when the playground was just a normal playground, but she just happened to trip. You know, so accidents happen. It's just part of life. I mean, you know, so I mean, I'm a little bit kind of close to this, almost to the point where I almost want to recuse myself from the whole thing. But
You can.
but yeah, I do have concerns. First and foremost, the amount of money. I just can't imagine spending this amount. I know we probably didn't even break $250,000. I know it's a long time ago and money was different, but we had parents who were helping to install it. It was a very simple design. I mean, I grew up at a time when simplicity, you know, sometimes, you know, if you think about it, sometimes less is more. You know, you get into these extravagant ideas about like what kids need hands-on, but kids, when they don't have something, they use their imagination to come up with ways to play. I mean, you know, I had a swing and a slide, and then if I didn't have that, I was playing with Tonka trucks in the backyard, and I was, you know, picking up a stick and playing Army or, you know, or something like that. I mean, we were creative with how we decided to play. And I just think that when you kind of over-design something, it just gets very exorbitant, and you actually diminish what the experience of what a playground should be for children is. That's just me philosophically. I know we need a new playground. I definitely support getting rid of what's there. I just question whether or not we have to spend that much money. And by the way, I know we need ADA compliance. I know it's important. You know, do we actually need that much for all, you know, the population of the town? Because it sounds like we're going down the road of every single playground that we have to install. We have to make sure we have all these very, very high cost, you know, elements to the playground. And is it really needed? Because I know that there's a certain population that needs it, but they have a playground already. They didn't have any before the Wilkins. Now we went from 0 to a playground right in the center of town that children could get to have ADA compliance. So like how, you know, where's this going? You know, every time a playground comes up, we're going to make it almost like a theme park. You know, then, I almost like crazy thinking, like, what are we going to put in a tram to make sure everybody can get, you know, to each of the playgrounds? You know, it just kind of gets, when I see these kind of numbers, it gets me concerned that what's wrong with getting back to just a simple requirement to make sure kids have a safe place to play that's enjoyable and allows them to use their own imagination to come up with creative ways to play.
I agree with you more. I think that a playground is meant for imagination, for kids to enjoy themselves as much as they can, especially our handicapped students, which I know that article that we put in for that one component was very high in order to get that in there. I was the PTO president over at the Wilkins at the time when it was the West, and they were doing the playground, so I supported that. And I know that's, Recreation Department's playground. But they had asked, and I know that's going to be part of this project, the PTO to help in funding something to go towards the playground. We could only afford, and I'm not even trying to joke, but like it was like a little drum thing because it was thousands of dollars. It was just astounding to see how expensive things were for playgrounds that last, not 10, 15 years, but last for like 20, 30, like a long time. So I can only say that based on that experience alone, I know that the smallest thing that we could contribute, which kids play with, was the smallest thing, and it was like $3,000. And that for us as a PTO, parents having to, put that money towards that was a lot. So I just want to kind of say that. I want to let Dr. Rabb speak a little more on that, but I don't look at it as an amusement park. I look at it more as us having an inclusive environment for all of the residents, the younger residents of Stoughton. That includes, handicapped students that need that accessibility.
No, thank you, Mrs. Gropey. And I hear you loud and clear. I've been involved in a couple of different playground construction situations. And oftentimes people say, hey, I can chip in, I'll help paint, I'll help install, I can help pour the footings. What we find is that the specifications now to do that correctly and make sure that it does last 20 or 25 years is something that has to be done professionally. So the landscape architect, the person selling us the playground, is going to insist that they are installed professionally, because if they're not, it would void the warranty, it would threaten the company. They could get sued if something were to break or something were to not be installed properly. And so they insist that things are installed professionally. And that certainly has increased the cost, but it has also increased the safety and made absolutely sure that any playground installed is safe and meets all of the code. The other thing I know is that when you do replace a playground, just like when you replace a school or any other big project, you do have to make it ADA compliant. And so we do have inspections of our playgrounds on a regular basis, and they know that this playground is aging. And when we tell our inspectors they're reasonable, we tell them, you know, we're working on replacing it, we're working on what we need to do to make it safe, they will allow us that time. They recognize that this doesn't happen overnight. And so, you know, the inspectors that have looked at this playground recognize how serious it is, but they know that we're working on it. And so they're like, okay, that's fine, but they want to see that work done. And they want to make sure that it's done professionally. So those are the couple of things that I can certainly contribute. But I hear you loud and clear. The other thing I think for me is just equity in general. Some students, the handicap is obvious, right? They're in a wheelchair, or they can't see, or they can't hear, or they have some other physical issue. For many students, the handicap isn't obvious. If it's a sensory issue, if it's an executive functioning issue, you don't know that that student has that executive function issue unless they're very, very serious. But by providing that inclusive playground, you're solving that problem for that kid without even knowing it. And they don't have to identify themselves as handicapped. They just know that this playground is going to be a safe place for them. There is a cost to that, but there's also an equity issue there, and making sure that those students are taken care of. So that I would respond that way.
And actually, I want to add one thing too. You look at things like the poured surface, which is expensive, but so is replacing 14 inches of playground accepted certified mulch every year on every playground. And I wished I'd thought that this would be a question. I would have looked up the number, but I want to say I spend close to $6,000 per playground a year. So, you know, when you've got something that's hopefully a once or twice in the playground life versus something that takes excessive repeat maintenance, and that repeat maintenance grows when some of those structures have exposed concrete foundations, and I'm mulching it twice a year just to cover that, because I have to meet the minimums and I have to provide the safety that some of this is a one-time or an upfront cost that will hopefully help decrease some of the ongoing costs.
Yeah, Vaughn, through you, just to make it clear, I wasn't advocating to have another set of parents come in. You know, I was trying to give context to like the way things have changed when, you know, between when I was a kid to when I was a parent to now when I'm hopefully someday going to be a grandparent, you know, and hopefully they're at a Hanson Hawk as well, and they're having a beautiful experience when they go to the playground. I just look at from a cost and the features and, you know, how much does the town actually need to install for ADA compliance? It's hard to believe that if we can't afford, compliance, can't we satisfy it by saying we have a playground, it's called the Wilkins. If you need ADA compliance, there you go. I don't understand why it has to be at every playground. I guess that's, you know, is the demand such that you have no choice but to install? And I don't even know if that's what's driving cost. I know the drainage is, and I think it's terrific that we're going to have better drainage than using mulch.
Yeah.
So, I just look at these playgrounds and how extravagant they get with all the features, and I just wonder, the committee chair Sandra Grappi was saying how $3,000 for just one little thing, So I'm wondering how many of those little things are contributing to a $950,000 playground.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I'm calling the question. But yeah, I'm in favor of good drainage. I'm in favor of like meeting the minimum requirements for ADA, and I get it that you have to let the manufacturer install to protect the warranty. I'm not against those things. I was just trying to create context.
It is different.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Sam, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I know I'm just a kid and I don't really understand like financials and everything, but I do think it's important to put the money that is needed for it to build a safe playground for kids. And like it is a lot of money, but also it's going to go a long way. I'm hoping that even when I'm an adult, I could come back here and bring my kids and I could see the playground that I helped to build. I think that the money is worth it to go towards a ever-evolving kind of community that we have seen so many changes in the way that kids develop and have been growing. I think it's just important to kind of change the way that things are built. Like with the Wilkins, it's more accessible, it's more inclusive. I think it would be nice to have more of that in our community, and that the money is kind of worth it in that sense.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, a quick follow-up. I do understand where Mr. Lurie's coming from when it comes to the expense of these things. I'm going to be frank, and Dr. Rob or Joyce had mentioned it earlier. When we replace a playground, it needs to meet ADA compatibility. Now, I've been very blessed to have 4 children without any serious sensory or disability issues. But as I say, my daughter's been teaching children with disabilities for some time. And I don't know quite what her reaction would be, although I could guess, if I told her she had to pack those kids into a van, drive them down the street, which a van she doesn't have, mind you, drive them down the street to another playground that does have inclusive hardware that allows those children to play. My daughter asked me 5 or 6 months ago if I could give her a bunch of kneelers, garden kneelers. I says, why on God's earth would you? Sure, I'll get you garden kneelers, but what do you need them for? Well, one of her children, at a whim, will smash that child's head against a desk, against the floor, against anywhere. She's fortunate to have a school with a new ADA-compliant playground. And I will be honest, it was weird initially to walk on that surface because it felt soft and squishy. But every time I look at that playground, I think of that child, who, by the way, is no longer smashing her head on things because she's being paid attention to. She gets to interact with the other children in the playground that's there for those children as a whole. We're integrating these kids everywhere, okay? So children with disabilities no longer go to special schools. They're mainstreamed into all the schools. So we as a town, we as a society, as a community, we need to provide for all those kids. So I respect what you're saying, Dave, but I don't think you're looking at it from that angle. And I'm asking you to consider it from that angle. As a parent, would I want to stop my day, leave work, and drive my child to an ADA-compliant playground? No. I don't know that I could. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for obliging me.
Thank you. Cynthia, you have a question or comment? Please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I think all of you are aware we have a huge childhood obesity issue. And the government's trying to help by modifying school lunches. They're blaming the food. But we also know that it's diet and exercise. That all children need safe places to exercise. A quarter of the children in Stoughton don't have a backyard. They live in an apartment. Let's be realistic. Not everybody has the white picket fence and the lawn and the swings and the slide. The average family income in Stoughton is $70,000. It's lower than every community abutting us except Brockton. The kids in this town depend on public spaces. I certainly don't want a bunch of kids running around my field. I may own open space, but it's not open to the public. So it's important. Recently, the government said 2/3 of the young people that apply for our military can't pass the physical. What does that mean for all of us in the future? Are we going to be like the people in Ukraine and at my age go out and learn how to use a submachine gun because there's nobody behind me? And I have 23, well, soon to be 23 nieces and nephews. I have no children of my own. And as luck would have it, except for some minor issues, they're all physically healthy. But it just takes one stray bullet, one car going up on the sidewalk, one fall, one case of spinal meningitis, and they can join those children that were born. I would hazard a guess there's more children in this country that have become handicapped than were born handicapped, but I don't have the facts and figures for that. We can look at our families and be thrilled with their good health, but that can change like that. Even small children have strokes for nobody knows what reason. So it's important that we have not one playground that says, this is for you weirdos, and this is for us okay people. No, no, no. That's called segregation, and it was outlawed by the Supreme Court in 1952. And thank goodness for the ADA. I thank those legislators every day. So I think when we think about cost, we have to think about the value we get for our dollar. And there's no price for the smile of a child. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Do we have any other questions, comments from the committee?
Yeah, Vaughn, through you, just once again, I'm not interested in bulldozing over a playground and turning it into a parking lot. I'm advocating strongly to have a beautiful playground to replace a decrepit one. Absolutely. My argument that I started was less is more, not more features and functions that make the experience a little bit more, I think, overdone and overpriced. So I am not against a new playground. I think kids will have a safe playground without having to spend $950,000 to do it. That's my argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 35? Questions or comments from the public? Karen, please identify yourself for the record.
Some of you might know my history. I was pretty loud in this town a couple of years ago. I've mellowed out. My MS is acting up. So I know what it's like to go someplace and not know what I'm walking in on. I applaud you for your endeavor, and I am very thankful that you're on my team. Because when I moved into Stoughton, I said that I was going to make this town more accessible than it ever was. And you're helping me do that. And with the new design, the Wilkins has a flaw. It has some blind spots. The day that we christened that park, I had my 2 granddaughters there. I couldn't find them. Scared the living shit out of me. I said, I looked over, I forget the woman superintendent. I yelled, "What the hell did you do with my grandkids?" They were in the structures. So please, when you do this one, no blind spots, please. Grandmas don't need heart attacks. And thank you for fixing, because I'm the one who sprains my ankles over in that damn park over in the Hanson when I take my kids there. I'm the one that get hurt.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Article 35, Hanson School Playground reconstruction from the committee. Any more questions or comments from the public? Article 35, Hanson School Playground reconstruction, CPC? No. Hearing none. I'd like to say I really like this project, and I will be supporting this, and I think it's excellent to provide this for kids. And I'm glad to see the CPC is stepping up and doing things for the community. I'm really happy about this project. Thank you.
Thank you to the CPC and the Stoughton Public Schools. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with you.
Thank you all, and thank you for your support.
That being said, we're going to move to Article 67. Thank you again. Does the school committee want to? Yep. Sure. Did you want to take did you want to close your meeting, or? Okay.
You're going off for your own meeting now, right? Or are you going to stay?
Yeah, we'll take a 2-minute, well, actually, we'll take a 5-minute recess so we can swap out here. Thank you.
And that was a redo of a prior appropriation. That was for $750,000, which we made a conscious decision to take as far as we could until we knew that it was not going to bring us to the end of the MSBA process required for feasibility study. And this is in the materials. If you haven't seen, we brought another copy of what, it's slightly different. There's one minor change. It's not substantively to the document you have, but it explains the purposes of what we've requested. And at that, if I can ask Carl Franceschi, he can go into the detail more, but just to say, because I can say from a layperson what Carl will say from a more informed technical point of view, is that we can get pretty far until the MSBA requires of us much more detail than 750,000 will buy. And I don't mind saying, and I think I submitted to you a list, that 750,000 doesn't appear to have bought as much as you're required to submit to MSBA anytime in recent years. In the last couple of years is all I looked at. So, but we're taking as far as we can. We've retained professionals, both the designer and the OPM, who both understand. They both worked on the high school project, by the way, and they both, with a familiarity of the town, our facilities, and of course the people. I think they were able to give us a better deal on services. I don't want to speak for Carl, of course, but because of that, something that we probably wouldn't get from anyone else. So we've taken the money appropriated as far as we could until it was clear that we wouldn't be able to bring this to the end unless we had more money. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that if we don't have the additional appropriation to finalize the feasibility study, that we'll have to consider at that point how far we do want to go before we have to make some tough decisions. Having said that, Carl, could you explain the...
Sure. I wasn't, part of the original appropriation, but just understanding when it was taken. For one thing, there's been pretty significant escalation in general cost of living and other expenses since what was now almost, a year and a half ago or something like that. But more specifically, there are parts that are required by the state, the school building authority, to be part of a feasibility study for a project like this that are necessary to complete the process. We're able to get started with the funds that were appropriated and get through the first phase of developing options, of looking at the existing conditions, of developing an education plan. Those parts are covered, but there's more design and detail required. The final phase of this process is called schematic design, and that's a term of art, I guess you might say, but for the school building authority, it's kind of an enhanced schematic design where you really need a lot of detail in order to form, to really describe the project, describe the scope, the schedule, and the budget, most importantly, with the state, because at that point in time is when Stoughton as a district would form a contract with the school building authority, basically, and establish, what their reimbursement would be, and what the schedule would be, and as I say, what the scope would be. And so they are a partner here, and they have pretty strict sort of standards and requirements. And many of these tasks, and I think it's fair to say all of these tasks that are identified on the breakdown are required to satisfy that stage of the project. And the original appropriation of $750,000 does not really cover some of these. And to go through them, there's a fair amount of detail written in the narrative there, but just to hit the highlights of it, the first one about redistricting, this project, as you might know, involves looking at not just replacing the South School, but also considering consolidating with another elementary school, so that Stoughton would go from 5 elementary schools to 4. And so that increases the complexity of the study and gets into the issue of redistricting. And particularly here, it's not simply like erasing a line and combining 2 school districts into one.
because the other district in consideration is the Wilkins on the other side of town, it really would involve, looking town-wide at where the district lines are drawn. And so that's an expertise, beyond architects and engineers. We have actually a redistricting specialist. He's out of Ohio. He does this nationally, but he understands the issues and can help develop options and so forth. So that's one bit of the expense that, probably was not anticipated originally. The survey, this is a topographic and property line survey that, in order to accomplish that more detailed schematic design, is going to be necessary. We're able to generate preliminary options just based on the town's GIS information. It does have some contour information. It does have some wetland lines, but to be really accurate about it, and which is necessary here, again, to make this ultimate agreement with the state for the project, they would insist that we have more detailed and recent, updated topographic and wetland information for whichever site ends up being selected here. We are looking at a site, of the South School and the adjacent property, but there's also another parcel, kind of what's known as formerly the Line Lumber site that's off of Park Street and a paper street nearby. And part of that investigation of the site involves the next item of geotechnical investigation too. Again, we can use available information to understand somewhat what the subterranean conditions are like, but to get to that next level of really being accurate and trying to minimize, contingencies or future change orders if we're not accurate. We really need to do some underground investigation, drilling borings and doing test pits for both to design the structural foundations and to deal with drainage issues, to understand the soils and so forth. And because we're looking at renovating and or demolishing the South School potentially as part of the project, we need to understand the hazardous materials that are there. And again, on a preliminary basis, we can use the annual reports, or I guess it's every 3 years, the district, like all districts, are required to do an assessment of the hazardous materials in schools. It has the acronym HERA, H-E-R-A, I forget what it stands for exactly, but basically it deals with kind of a visual observation of the school and what materials likely would be, potentially hazardous. But again, to be more accurate, we should do some tests and be able to quantify the extent and therefore the cost of dealing with hazardous materials. So we don't have proposals for any of these specifically at this point in time because, again, we sort of want to take the project a little bit further to be more precise, but we certainly have budgets together with, our architect and engineering team, along with the project management team, have, looked at projects in our experience and their experience and put some budgets on these, and all of these numbers listed here we would consider to be, not to exceed numbers that, to establish a budget. Because we don't want to do this again, obviously. We want to hopefully just make one additional appropriation that covers us for this entire phase. And so that's where we've added some contingency in there just to be prudent and come up with a total of an additional $250,000. And just to put that in context too, there's a lot of good information available from the School Building Authority on their website. And you can look at previous projects, including comparable elementary schools. And most of them are in the range of $1 million or so, the recent projects for this phase of the project, the feasibility and schematic design phases. So it is certainly not, out of whack with comparable projects in other districts, in our opinion and in the owner's project manager's opinion. So that's where we are. Again, I think what we'd say is, sort of wrap this up, is all of these tasks are necessary to complete this phase. We are able to get to about June or so, so it fortunately works well with your town meeting, should this pass at town meeting, that we could then implement these additional steps at that time, and we have enough funding to get to that point. So I'm happy to answer your questions however you want to work this, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? You have a bunch? Okay. Chet, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, why is it $85,000 for a site survey? Do we already know line numbers where they're going to put the South School? Why are we paying $85,000?
We don't have a recent topographic property line survey of that property, of those 3 parcels. We have GIS information, but not a,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Okay. And traffic study, $30,000 to $45,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't touch on that one. That site, actually, both sites have traffic issues with them. The Line Lumber site in particular has frontage on Park Street, so there would be a new driveway connection there, and with the nature of that road and trying to make left turns in and out of a school site, I'm sure that you know, a traffic study is going to be warranted there. Whether we actually need a traffic signal or not would be determined, for instance. And even if it were to be an addition renovation of the South School, for those who are in that district or familiar with it, the pickup and drop-off times at that school are really chaotic, and I'm not quite sure that, you know, there's any good solution to that with the property that's owned there and the frontage, the limited frontage on those streets. But even there, a traffic opinion would be useful as well.
Okay, you good, Chet? Yep. Okay. Any other questions, comment? Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, why wasn't any of this thought of, we got some,
It was, sorry. It was, the $750,000 request was actually from MSBA. It was Dr. Marcus who put that together in consultation with the MSBA. It was, well, let me put it this way. Other schools have tried to do it full feasibility with $750,000. That reflects on the list of other schools in the last 2 years that have done that. They've all found out that you can only get so far when you need to request, all 3 of them on that list had to go back for additional funding. So it was considered, it was a number that came from MSBA, and in fact, we tried to make it work. And also, if I can say, I think I wasn't there for the request, but my guess is it was probably done because we just came off a high school project, and probably the number was guided by just the notion that we want to save as much money as we can. We submitted a fairly conservative request, tried to get as far as with it as we could, and in fact, could only get so far until we reached the point, as Carl said, where MSBA just requires much more detail in what they're asking for. So
if I can just add, we also did that like 4 years ago when the pandemic
yeah, that's
occurred.
a good point.
So, you know, there's inflation, like,
Right.
there's definitely the impact there.
Right, the numbers that I submitted for review are only the last 2 years.
You good, Mark? Did he answer the question? Okay. Any other questions? John, you have a question?
Well, more of a comment than anything. You know, I appreciate the information you sent, and I can understand why you're only going back a couple of years, but you look at what's happened over the past few years, those are the more relevant numbers. What I would like to see, so that we could provide it in the book for the people who are going to be looking at this, I'd like to, through you, Mr. Chair, whoever can provide it, I'd like to see some accounting for the $750 that was originally appropriated, so we know where it went, because I think it's going to be imperative to have that in the book, so when people are looking at it, they can say, all right, I mean, I think everybody understands what's happened over the past few years with cost for materials and everything else. But I think that's going to be very important to have that information so we can provide it.
So in addition to just the accounting that the town would do, it's also reimbursable. a portion of it, the original appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
So MSBA requires robust accounting also, so it's something we can absolutely
Right,
provide.
no, I just think, I think for town meeting, it's gonna be, well, I'll speak for myself, and I don't think I'm that different than a lot of the town meeting members. They're gonna wanna see where the $750,000 already went.
Yeah.
And just to make clear for you, Mr. Chair, it's not going to be gone at town meeting.
Oh, I understand that, yep.
It's encumbered.
You're projecting now that you're still gonna need this, but I think that's gonna be an important part of trying to sell this to get another $250,000.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Joel, you had a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I defer to Mr. Laurie.
Well, no, I was gonna say, do you wanna go ahead, or do you?
Oh, no.
Dave, do you have a question? You want me to go down the line, Dave?
It's up to you. I'll go now or after Joel.
All right, do you have any questions?
Chet's been doing a great job.
Eric, do you have any questions? I'm good. Mark, do you have any questions? Adam, any questions? I asked Laura.
Okay.
Laura said no, thank you. Bob, do you have any questions?
I'm all set at this time.
Elliot, do you have any questions?
I am fine.
Thank you. Dave, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
I absolutely do. Yeah, open the window, please. My first question through you, Vaughn. Thank you for the presentation of what you're doing, and I attended one of your meetings, and I applaud the work you're doing. It is great, and it's very transparent. I wanted to acknowledge that. I just want to get kind of clarity on what's gone from where we were and where we are, because without redistricting, how much of the 750 do you need without redistricting? Or how much are we short on the 750 if we did not have redistricting?
It should be broken down roughly.
Yeah, but however, a lot of these figures would change if you didn't have redistricting. In other words, the traffic study, you're going to have a lot more traffic if you have 515 students going to the same location, right?
Well, we'd have different counts, but we'd have a traffic study
Well, I'm
requirement.
saying
But
it's kind of muddled, right? The difference between a South-only versus a consolidated school, correct?
I can answer.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the concern. The issue is that our feasibility study agreement with the MSBA requires all of this. So whether redistricting happens or it doesn't, we have to do all of these things as part of their process.
Okay.
We have,
through you-
in all the options that we have to show.
All right, so through you, Vaughn. So what you're saying is that you're short regardless of the redistricting? Because we heard things around the redistricting assessment study, 25 to 30,000, but there was also talk about a GIS personnel that had to be added to the team in order to do the redistricting as well, which is unique from just doing a South only. That's at least what I heard in the meetings.
The GIS.
The GIS
data
and
that
the
was
professional
collected.
the professional service that comes in on GIS is supplemental to where the project was without redistricting. Without redistricting, you didn't need the extra personnel.
That's true. That's part of, GIS is part of the redistricting services. They're collecting the data of where students live and so forth for that purpose.
So you're saying then only $30,000 from the 250, so you need 220 without redistricting? I'm trying to get to a number of how much of the 250 is needed if you did not redistrict?
I'm not sure we could answer that, but as we say, it's a required part of the project.
The redistricting is?
Yes, that we study 2 enrollments, 2, multiple options, and so forth.
Okay, through you, Vaughn. So some of the questions I had on this, and I have a lot, I hope they don't overlap with Joel, because I'm sure he would want to. There was a meeting on March 11th of 2021. We have minutes on the FinCom meeting. It was on page 3, in which Joyce Husseini said the possibility of combining schools will also be looked at. And it was actually in many of the presentations that not only came to FinCom, but all around town on what was going to happen with the feasibility study. So redistricting was part and parcel of the 750 originally. So I didn't understand why in the letter that we got from you just recently, that in that the first sentence it says this was not a service envisioned in the original appropriation from the town. But we did. It's almost like it's a direct contradiction of what we were told.
Yeah, so it wasn't around for that appropriation? All I can tell you is that what we have right now is an agreement that requires, a feasibility study agreement, requires certain components to get us to the end, to a schematic design. And everything that we've asked for is either required or, as I said earlier, and I hate to say it this way, or we have to reconsider going on at all, to be perfectly blunt about it, because we won't reach the end, and we can't submit incomplete work. So these are just good faith numbers that we submitted based on Carl's experience and the OPM's experience about what they'll cost, but we have to do it. So whether or not the 750 originally intended that to cover redistricting also, still, I mean, that's just one component of the several things we need to add, none of which, by the way, includes the architect services or the OPM services. These are outside consultants we have to bring in.
Yeah, through you, Vaughn, then you're totally comfortable with at least revealing the fact that it came up short from what we expected, even though it was envisioned in the original plan, was to redistrict. It was redistricted, but we didn't estimate the amount. There was a mistake in the original appropriation.
You know what? I don't want to say that, because right now what I'm trying to do is get us to the end of a project for what town meeting charges us to do. Town meeting voted to appoint a committee, appropriate money, to do a feasibility study. All I'm trying to do is get us to the end, not assign blame, because frankly, I think the MSBA telling us what to appropriate is the answer to the question of where
Can I just maybe try to answer it, because I was here when that happened?
Sure.
And probably won't answer it, but I'll try. So when this happened and Dr. Marcus was here, obviously he's not here to answer that and Joyce isn't, but what I can say is he worked very closely with the MSBA, and that was the number. I remember actually saying, are we sure this is enough? Are we sure? And it was, I talked to the MSBA. I'm sorry, I'm going to yell. I forgot. I talked to the MSBA. This is what the number is. And we said, okay, we were confident that that was going to cover everything. And you are correct. When we were talking, way in the beginning, it was about potential redistricting, all of that stuff. Absolutely. Now, not being professionals in that world and going based on recommendation of this is what the amount would cost to do that, that is where we were at the time. Now, again, I'm only answering what I can know, so I don't want to go back. I'll give it back to you after. The other piece of this is we did have a pandemic, and the price of things have skyrocketed. And, the price of service has skyrocketed. There's just different factors that go into that. I'm not saying the whole $250,000 is because of that matter, but what I can say is that, this isn't a mistake. What this is, a collaborative effort was made with the state to figure out what is that amount that we think will happen, and it just didn't do it. It's not going to cover it. And what I'm hoping is we're able to kind of, I know that this is broken out to say these are the amounts and this is what what it's going to bring us to, but I do think having like more itemized information for the members of FinCom to understand where that money went will kind of help to portray the picture of this is all the steps that we had to take and what we had to do, and this is the cost of it. I think that might help a little bit. I don't know, but tried to answer a little bit of that.
Through you, Vaughn, I think what I'm trying to do is just to make sure that town meeting has a clear understanding that it's not an expanded scope, it's a correction of a previous appropriation. There's nothing wrong with admitting that the truth of the matter is that we anticipated something and we have to adjust because it was the wrong number. I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't think there's anything, mishandled at the time. I don't believe any of that. I'm just saying it should be clear that it's a correction of a previous appropriation.
So, yeah, we don't, yeah.
It's not the expanded scope.
Carl would like to say, did I get your name right?
Yes, thank you.
Carl?
Carl
has something to
Franceschi.
say. Thank you.
It may be a semantic issue too. I think what was meant by the narrative is that the service of needing an outside consultant to help with redistricting was not anticipated at the time the 750 was identified. Not that redistricting wouldn't happen. It's just some districts, like I say, if it's a simple matter, can do redistricting internally without an outside consultant.
Yeah.
Here, it was the professional team that came on, the owner's project manager and ours, that identified.
From what I'm hearing, MSBA requires this anyway. Is that
Right.
correct? All right.
Vaughn,
This
I'm
is
not-
correct, right?
Vaughn, I'm not, that's not the.
I'm just clarifying what was said. I'm
Well,
asking.
I
Okay.
think I still have the floor.
Do you have another question, Dave?
Well, yes, I do. I have more. I think what originally was contemplated, because I heard it, was that it wasn't as if you could just erase the border between two districts, because there's a gap, there's a district in between, sandwiched between. It changed, the scope wasn't understood that, oh, you mean it's not as easy as erasing a line between two districts? And I think that was the difference between what they thought could be done and what you're now telling us we learned through the experience of doing it. I think that's kind of where it happened, but that's just what I thought. The other thing is that I noticed, based on online agendas for the South School Building Committee, that they had a meeting in June of '22, and then took, I guess, around 6 months off, because you didn't meet again until December 2022. What happened over that amount of time? How much inflation or cost impact is there when you lose half a year off the study? Or was there something going on that I just couldn't read from the online list of meetings that were posted?
Yeah, so there's a lot not reflected in that did happen. So right around that time, we did have to hire, and correct me if I get anything, if I miss anything here, but, so, let me back up half a step. So when the committee was first formed in November, we actually did take some time off, and that was purposeful. We took about until March of 2021, so that Dr. Rabb could go back to the MSBA and fight for more money on our enrollment, or fight for a higher enrollment number, so that in the end we could get a larger reimbursement. And actually was successful with that. So we started back up in March. Then we, so you're talking about the period from June 2022? Yeah. So at that point, we began the OPM hiring process. We had an OPM in place by, I want to say, the fall. Yeah. And started looking for a designer in, like, this time last year?
I can help out a little bit.
Yeah, please, because I'm getting less.
The procurement on an OPM and the procurement on a designer are lengthy processes. And not only do we have to follow that procurement carefully, but then there are deliverables to the MSBA. They only meet so many times a year. So you have to plan ahead for when they're going to meet. And if you miss that deadline, then you have to go to the next meeting, which could be a couple of months away. So yes, back in December of '21, January of '21, we realized that the design enrollment was low. We petitioned the MSBA. We took some time. They were successful. We were successful. We were able to increase the design enrollment. And then we launched the whole, and then it was March when we got the feasibility, we got the feasibility study agreement in January, February. March was that time when they kind of accepted all that and said, okay, now you can start looking for an OPM. And so we went through the spring with the OPM procurement process, and I believe it was in July, I could be wrong, that we went to the MSBA, finished up the OPM process, and then the OPM starts us with the designer process, and that took the rest of the fall. So we had the designer in place by December. Once that was done, then this whole feasibility study starts in earnest, because we have the OPM and the designer in place.
All right, so that 6 months is baked into the whole equation on
Procurement.
what it takes to do. Okay.
That was a long way of saying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rabb. So,
Yeah.
do you have another question,
I do.
Dave, or should
I
we
do.
jump to Joel?
I have,
so that Joel,
I
you don't
have,
steal all Joel's
I have
questions?
another, I might have, I don't know if.
You might have stole his question.
Yeah, I have more. During the February 15th South School building meeting, it was during comments that I made, you replied that the leadership within the South School Committee was meeting with Hilltop Securities about what the debt capacity is for the town.
I didn't say that.
Well, you were in, you'd never had a meeting with Hilltop?
No, what I said was we've been in touch with the auditor who gave us information from, I think what I said was, we've already been investigated that, and we have the information provided by Hilltop. Hilltop, right? Is that the number? Yeah. So they gave us a memorandum, and actually, I think it was dated that day of that meeting where they had broken down the entire debt profile of the town at that point, and it was from Hilltop to Mr. Rowe, who provided it to the building committee, or Dr. Robb specifically, but.
So through you, then what are the results of it? What do we know about our ability to borrow on a major project like a combined school, let's say?
Right, so
I'm,
we're not ready to.
Hang on a second.
Excuse me, the appropriation is to put together a combined school. The combined school is, there's going to be two options because of the appropriation.
Dave, we're going to take a question from Joel. Okay?
Well, I have more questions.
Because we seem to be getting off topic here. We need to stay on topic here.
I'm gonna just I just want to state it, that this appropriation opens it up for the discussion of either a 225 student school or a 515 student school.
Okay.
That's what this appropriation allows.
Okay, Article 67 is fund feasibility study of South Elementary School. So do you want to talk about a debt exclusion override or something, or debt?
No, I didn't ask that. I asked about the debt capacity of the town. It doesn't have to do with debt exclusion, because maybe it fits within the budget. Who knows? That's not the point.
But
It's
that's
how
not
much
really in
debt-
the article, though, so we're going to try to stay a little bit on topic. So, Joel, do you have a question?
I have a bunch.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, Dave, piece of information that you may or may not know is that the selection of the architect is not done by the town. It's done by the MSBA. They select the architect, and that's why it takes a few months to get an architect, because you have to get on their schedule of when their selection board meets. And you were there for the high school one, so you know how it works, okay? So that's one of the reasons, okay?
Thank you.
The other thing is that we have a reimbursement rate, I don't know what it is, I think it's like 59% or something, or whatever it is, for this feasibility study agreement. Is it the intention of the school committee or the building committee to go to the MSBA and ask for an addenda to the original feasibility study agreement so we can get reimbursed for the money?
Yeah, very good question. So that was one of the early questions that I had asked to Compass, now Vertex, and we'll try. Can't say, we have an agreement, and we can't, I mean, they're certainly not going to commit to amend it until after they know that we have a commitment for more money on the town's part, so we're going to try, but right now, all that we know for sure is that we have reimbursement on the $750 that's been appropriated.
Okay, and it's also my understanding through other conversations I've had that the $250,000 may be reimbursable once we go to the full project.
Yeah, I mean, once the project's approved, sure, but.
Well, no, it's part of the, they have what they call a
Yeah.
project
Right.
agreement, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Leading questions, Joel.
Okay, fine. I think that it would be very helpful, TJ.
That's where
TJ, I think it would be very helpful if a copy of the feasibility study agreement was submitted to Vaughn so that he could submit it to the rest of the finance committee.
That would be great,
because
TJ.
Then
I'll do that,
we can
yeah.
see exactly what the scope of work is. I've worked under 3 feasibility study agreements, and some of the things that you're mentioning that you're saying are required by the MSBA are a surprise to me. So I think it would be interesting to see what it actually says.
So yeah, I'll provide you with it, but I mean.
Thank you.
What we're getting at is that, and you would appreciate this part, is that schematic design at the end of it certainly is more detailed than anything that, that the prior two stages require of us.
Oh, I totally understand
Yeah,
that.
so while we can certainly get away with GIS for a survey, for first two, you know what I'm saying. In the
I'm
end-
not even
Yeah.
disputing some of these things, okay? Carl, do we have anything set up with the MSBA Facilities Assessment Subcommittee yet, or
No, that's after we submit the preferred.
after you do the preferred thing?
preferred option.
And then they'll make a determination then?
Yes.
Okay, fine. All right, so the thing that I have a problem with is that under the redistricting, additional costs that you're looking for that, and plus under the traffic study, and it says here, for example, the additional fee includes traffic observations for the Park Street site. Okay, my question is, has Dr. Rabb and the school committee decided now that they're going to have a combined school? And we're just backing into it?
No, the decision hasn't been made. The school committee makes that decision in June.
Who's going to make the decision?
The school committee makes that decision in June.
School committee will make the
June.
decision. And you have not made that decision yet?
We're waiting for the feasibility study to come back. We know all the options, and then that decision will be made.
Well, it's my understanding that there has to be 5 options that have to be identified. Have you identified 5 options yet?
We have to identify the 5 options. We're working on those. The next deliverable is the education plan and the work around the education plan. So we have to submit that by by
March
April
14th.
4th. March 14th, the school committee will vote, and then we have to submit that to the MSBA on April 4th. Then we launch into the next piece, where we start pricing everything out. We look at the 5 options. We have to show all of those 5 options, and then the school committee will get that information in June.
Okay.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
So Joel, you might appreciate this, because this is one of my questions at the last committee, is whether we were locked into a combined school by the educational plan?
That's
A-
what
And,
I'm
right.
asking, in
That was my question at the committee level, and the answer, I think Carl gave it to me, and I thought it was very creative, and I can't wait to see how it was played out, is that the educational program was actually designed to be flexible enough to encompass both a standalone and a combined, and a combined,
Yeah.
consolidated and consolidated school. So,
All right.
You good with that, Joel?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I don't really have a problem with the $250,000, frankly.
All right, so any other questions from the committee on Article 67? Fund feasibility study of South Elementary School. Any other questions or comments from the committee on this? Hey, Dave, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. I want to finish up where we left off. I just want
It's a
to,
question, right?
well, first of all, the original question I asked that I was being blocked from asking is simply because at the end, I just hope that a group called a feasibility study would be able to provide the town with how much we could afford in a project, because there's obviously a big difference between a 225-student school and a 550
Mr.
student
Recupero,
school.
do you have
But-
an answer to this?
two words. So,
Thank you.
through you to Mr. Lurie, I don't take it as an unfair question at all, by the way, that as it relates to feasibility, because if we can't afford it in the end, makes no sense to do feasibility. So rest assured, and I hope this message came through when you came to the committee meeting in February, is that we will, much as we did on the high school, we will have an identified number that we know we can live under and not a dollar beyond that. And we haven't identified that yet, but we've gotten preliminary numbers that say this is where you can fit in a project of that size, of that general size. I'm trying to be very unspecific with my text, but you get my point. Well, I'll have an eye on it, as will everybody else. I guarantee you that. And if you want regular updates, I'm happy to.
All right,
Thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
I actually would. I just to wrap up with just basic questions through you, Vaughn, is what is the going cost for a per square foot building? Like, what is the going? There must be a number of this is how much it goes, what it costs for to build a school.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd suggest there's excellent data at the Mass School Building Authority website.
Thank you.
They're very transparent, and they list the sizes of projects and the construction cost and the reimbursement rate.
So you're referring me there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last is there an order of magnitude number yet on either a 225 student or a 515 student size school?
Not yet.
No.
Not
All right.
yet.
When will that be available?
After the education design is voted, so probably sometime in May is around reasonable
May.
when that's going to start happening.
Thank you, Dr. Rapp.
Yeah.
Thank you, I'm done. Thank
Any
you very
other
much.
questions or comments from the committee? Article 67, fund feasibility study of South Elementary School. Hearing none. We're going to get to that right now. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 67, fund feasibility study of South Elementary School?
Do you mind if I sit over there?
I don't mind at all, Mr. Gito. Please identify yourself for the record.
I was going to move up there. Thank you. I'm Lou Gito, representative of Precinct 4 and member of the Board of Selectmen. But probably more important, I was on the Facilities Master Planning Committee for eons. I was there when the 2010 report came out, and again when the 2017 report came out. So that meant that I was there much earlier than 2010. I don't know what year. We have been looking at the South School for all the time that I have been on that committee. We've deferred work on that school for years. I think the question before the board for your committee is, are we going to fund another amount of money in order to complete the study? We have been approved by MSBA to be considered to be able to build a school, which would mean that at the end of the process, we would get somewhere around 50% of the money back. We're talking about a small amount of money in relation to the whole project. We're talking about looking at two options. One, which would combine two schools and probably save over the next 50 to 60 or 100 years a lot of money in terms of operation and maintenance costs versus just replacing a school. That is something that the feasibility study will look at. It's important for the town to have a broad look at a major construction project like this. This is not the time to have a political discussion about whether or not we should have a combined school or a separate school. And we're not having that tonight, but we don't need to have anything like that tonight. What I think we need to do is vote in favor of getting the additional money so that we can complete the study and then build a building that we have put off doing any work on for perhaps 10 years now. It seems pretty clear to me and a pretty simple thing to make a decision on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gito. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 67, Fund Feasibility Study of South Elementary School. Hearing none. So the next item on the agenda, any other matters?
Thank you.
I'm going to defer right now to the school committee. Did they have any further issues they wanted to discuss?
So I know we had brought up and we had talked about the Chapter 70 money. It's so late, my head's going to explode. So I know. So obviously, there's no other business to take up this evening. It's gotten late. So yeah. So what would be helpful is if can I speak to the chair of FinCom tomorrow to talk about next steps and what we need to do? Can I speak to the chair of the? No. But I think that would be the best bet, and we can close the meetings now, and then we can see what the next steps in moving forward with correcting that health insurance bit with the money that we're getting. Make sense?
I'd be more than happy to speak with you if he isn't.
Well, I want to speak to the chair. I'm sorry. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll talk to you, Katie.
I'm going to talk to David.
Make a motion to,
Close the meeting.
Yeah, we can talk about.
They can do their.
Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.
What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, we can communicate whenever you want to meet again,
Yes, we can
and you
talk.
make a decision on what you're doing.
Right,
with
and if
that.
we have to, we can
Get
come back
us.
to a meeting.
Is it a separate?
Okay.
But if they have to come back to a meeting, don't they have to
No,
have
we
at least-
don't.
We'll let them sort that
You
out.
have to have a quorum of your board with you.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, we have one tonight. I'll bring another one. Bring my posse with me when it's time to do that. But, sure. So what we'll do, everybody's exhausted and wants to go home. So
Not
what
me.
we're going to do is we're going to close the meeting. I'll
You're gonna
talk
close
with
your
you.
meeting.
Yes, and then we will, I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone because I don't want to mess up. And then we'll discuss and we'll figure out next steps. Hope you feel better. And then if we come back and then what we have to do. And I will figure that out as the chair for the school committee.
Will you want to take care of your meeting so then we
Yes.
can
Yeah, then we
continue
can
our.
make a
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Great, we're done.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
I'd like
Thank
to
you for
make a
having us.
I'm going to make a motion that we're going to continue the public hearing
Oh, okay.
to March 2nd at 7 PM at the school committee room at 31 Walnut?
31 Pierce Street.
Pear Street, Pear Street.
And the
Well, it
room will be
comes
set
out
up differently, we promise.
Motion on the table. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
That's right,
We have a
tomorrow.
motion and a second on the floor to continue the public hearing.
Till tomorrow, 3/2 at 7 PM.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Who seconded it?
Diane seconded.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have another motion?
I move we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do you have a second? Eric gets the second.
There you go.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? All opposed? Have a great night. Thanks for watching.
And make that noted at 10:50 Apple time.